Call to order the regular board meeting of Tuesday, August 11th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Barry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Echeverry.
Here.
Treasurer LaFava.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee DeMink.
Here.
Trustee Vosper. Here. Clerk Barry is here.
All members are present. Item 4, presentations. There are no presentations tonight. Item 5 are department reports. If any departments wish to update the board for the public, now is the time. Trustee DeMink.
This is from the Parks and Rec Department. The Chesterfield Township Senior Center is closed and will remain closed in accordance with all executive orders. Engage with us through our Facebook pages at Chesterfield Township Parks and Rec or the Chesterfield Township Senior Center. We look forward to recreating together again soon. The Leisure Services Department encourages you to visit our website at parks.chesterfieldtownship.org or our new Facebook pages to stay up to date on activities. New programs pop up regularly and space is limited. Registration for a Fall Frenzy Baseball League ends on August 21st. T-ball, pitching machine, minor and major baseball leagues are available for boys and girls ages 5 to 12. Limited registrations are accepted for all activities, and the status of all programs are subject to cancellation or changes based on the pandemic response. Next, the radiating summer sun affords us plenty of opportunity to play, bring a carload of guests, and enjoy the warm view of Anchor Bay from inside Brandenburg Park, walk the pier, watch the boats cool off on the splash pad, and explore the playground. Thank you.
Any further Clerk Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd just like to update the board and the public as to the election, some election information from Chesterfield Township for the August 4th primary. The countywide turnout for the August 4th primary was 32.3%. Chesterfield outperformed the county, turning out at 33.7% of registered voters, which was 11,562 voters who participated on Election Day. That is a historic record for Chesterfield Township for an August primary election. Information about upcoming elections, as well as any information that voters may need for participating in the November general election, will be available through the button on the homepage of our website, as well as on the county clerk's website and the Secretary of State's website as well, under the Voter Information Center. Thank you.
Treasurer LaFava.
The Treasurer's Department has finally received the new drop box. It's been installed. It's pretty blue with some reflective tape on it. I think everybody should be relieved now that there's a new drop box out there. I guess there was a lot of concerns about the issue of the drop box, especially when it was getting stuffed with everything for every department because of COVID-19 and the offices not being open. But we're well assured there's a new drop box out there. It's real nice and shiny, and nobody will have to worry moving forward about the drop box. Thank you.
Any further updates to the board? Clerk Barry, I believe for that.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I apologize. From the Clerk's Department, we are featuring our late night passport event this Thursday, August the 13th. Please visit our website and register on Eventbrite if you would like to participate in the passport event that takes place after hours. It's often helpful for those who work during the day. That is an additional service that's offered by the Clerk's Department. Our Clerk's Department has been in the top 1% of performers for passports as decided by the U.S. Department of State for the last several years, so you can be very confident in coming to the clerk's office and receiving any services you may need during regular business hours for passports or participating in our late night passport event. Thank you.
Any further department reports? Item number 6 is the consent agenda.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. 6A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of June 28, 2020. Item 6B, approval of the agenda with addendum if necessary. 6C, approve a request by the Department of Public Safety to pay an invoice in the amount of $18,000 from GL number 205-301-864 and 205-336-864. This invoice is in payment for implicit bias and de-escalation training for all public safety employees. Item 6D, approval of the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item B, or I'd like to hold.
Motion by trustee Domingue to approve the consent agenda with, by pulling item B. That means you'd like further discussion?
Yes.
Is there support?
Second.
Motion by trustee Domingue, support by clerk Corrigan.
Mr. Supervisor, I would also like to have an agenda item removed, consent agenda item C. I would like that considered on its own.
Will the motion maker amend his motion to remove item B and C?
Yes.
Continued support?
Continued support.
We have a motion to remove or to approve the consent agenda item A and D only. Item B and C will be considered separately. Discussion. Questions or comments from the public? Motion by trustee Domingue, support by clerk Berry to approve the consent agenda, item A and D. Clerk Berry, please call roll.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth. Aye. Treasurer LaFava.
Aye.
Supervisor Eckley.
Aye. The consent agenda, item A and D, is approved. We'll move on to item 6B, the approval of the agenda with addendum if necessary.
I would like to approve the agenda without item 9A. I would like removed from the agenda for this evening.
Support.
Motion by trustee Domingue to approve the agenda with the elimination of item 9A. Support by trustee Bosworth. Discussion.
Do we need to add yours in there too?
No, we're going to consider
a separate issue.
We're going to consider
Okay.
that one after item 6B. We'll go on to item 6C. Would you like to, as a motion maker, start the discussion, or I can?
Yes, okay, I would like this addendum item removed from the agenda. Mr. LaFava, as the treasurer, put this on there about admission to Brandenburg Park. Mr. LaFava runs the treasurer's department. He does an excellent job, and he has his deputy clerk. Ms. Ellen Clark does it great. But for the Parks and Rec department, we have a department head. And the department head was not apprised of this. This was a last-minute thing that came out Friday afternoon when I got advised of it. Also, the Parks and Rec department has a Parks and Rec commission, which is a group of residents from the township that are appointed by the board. They usually vent all the things that are going on with the parks, and it comes back to us to vote on. The third thing is I was appointed as the liaison by this board to the Parks and Rec department 4 years ago. I was not asked about this, knew about it, until I was advised it was on the agenda. I believe this should be, Mr. LaFava, with all due respect, sir, I believe you should have contacted the department head and forwarded it to Parks and Rec Commission and have at least the decent courtesy to advise me of this, because I'm the liaison, and you people voted for me to be on the liaison back 4 years ago, sir.
Trustee Joseph was next. Treasurer LaFava would like to go.
All of the things that trustee Domingue just pointed out are all, I think, very valid reasons for voting against the agenda item. And I certainly would like to have a discussion about why it's a relevant agenda item. What you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that the procedure for putting an item on the agenda must meet some requirements that are not even included in the board rules or in the APO concerning the board rules. This is simply a request for consideration of an idea, and all of the things that you laid out for why you don't think it's a good idea, I understand completely. And I too, you would have me, as you started to lay out your concerns. There is an argument that says maybe the better route for this is through the Parks and Rec Commission and maybe through the department head, and maybe talking about how to replace the funding and so forth. But those are all issues that come out in the discussion of the agenda item. What you're saying tonight is that a simple majority of the board can decide what items are on the agenda. And that's troubling, because that eliminates the discussion. Now, in order for a board member who's not affiliated with a particular commission, they must get the approval of the commission and the department heads and all the other people involved in that department before they can simply bring an agenda item forward. So if in the discussion of this agenda item, we agreed, hey, let's consider this, and this was a discussion that I personally had with the supervisor about ways to provide relief to our residents. There was discussions about the reduction in the water rate and how we would provide relief to residents. The park and free admission to the park was one of those issues. It didn't go through Parks and Rec Commission. It went to the board, and that's, I think, what we have before us tonight. In talking with the treasurer, I think there's a belief that we're putting millions of dollars into the park, and then we're charging people $5 a piece, every time they want to enjoy their park. So I'd like to just have the discussion, and if at the end you successfully argue the points that you laid out, you may even have my agreement. But what you're asking is no consideration of an agenda item which was appropriately brought in accordance with our APO, and then you're using potentially a superior vote, 1 plus even, and you're saying those individuals aren't even allowed to bring ideas forward. That's wrong.
Treasurer Fada.
Problem with this is I don't get the board agenda until sometime late on Thursday. And when there's a large agenda item on there, like the Brandenburg Park being involved, it is the prime time to take in consideration the residents that have already made comments about, I don't, whatever is in my agenda item. So if somebody can put something on the agenda without all the board members knowing what's going on the agenda, and you don't get it until Thursday sometime in the afternoon, you have very little time to react with something on the agenda for the board, like Friday. And that's what I did. Excuse me for not trying to contact everybody, but if a board member doesn't know what's on the agenda, that's going to be on Tuesday's agenda, and he tries to react to it, he has very little time. And on Friday, I think after 9 o'clock in the morning, I think I was the only one in the building to talk to. There was nobody down in Parks and Rec to talk to because it was closed off. So excuse me.
Thank you. Any further board comments?
Do you want to go, sir, or do we have a second on?
Any further board comments? No. Go ahead.
Okay. I was here Friday morning, about 10:30, because I was down in building and parks. It wasn't at that time I knew about this. I didn't find out about the lake.
I was here Friday morning myself. I just feel that you gentlemen all have your water rate advisory board, which you guys chair, and that's your, I understand it. I'm on Parks and Rec as the liaison. And granted, I am not a full-time employee here, I'm just a trustee. But I was assigned to that, and I have a department head that did not know about this either until she contacted me. I just feel that Mr. Fada, sir, maybe you should just go through, redraw this request, submit it through the Parks and Rec director, let it go to the commission meeting at the end of this month, and then get a reply, sir.
Thank you. Treasurer Fada.
That leaves the opportunity to vet this at the same time we're looking at approving the fish habitat, which the residents won't be able to enjoy, some of them based on the statements that I got, unless they get free admission. So the two go hand in hand. So if you can't understand that the residents go to New Baltimore rather than our own park because New Baltimore is free, then I'm sorry for you. But we spend the residents' money. It's not the board's money. It's not Parks and Rec's money. It's the residents' money. It's going to be spent on something that they should be able to enjoy. And you're going to say, no, I don't want to give them the opportunity. I want to spend their money, but I don't want to give them the opportunity to enjoy it. Let them keep going down to New Baltimore. And that's exactly what's going to happen if you table this to next month, or the month after, or the month after that. Another thing that's happening is the parks are one place that people can go right now. What are you going to do? You're going to sit there and try to stop me from talking again, Trustee Osborne? I mean, I see you got a disgusted look, but it's the truth.
As soon as Treasurer will
The residents have, outside activities are good for the residents right now. They're clustered in their home, especially seniors. So this is an opportunity to let them go out and utilize the park. I'm sorry that I didn't notify you, but I'll guarantee you on Friday, that end of the building was closed down. Thank you. And the other thing is, we stayed here in the finance and the treasury department because we were afraid that the whole building was going to get closed down on Monday, so we could get transfer checks out to make payroll tomorrow. Thank you.
Trustee Vosper. Trustee Joseph.
Again, not to belabor the point, but the issue that I hear you saying, thank you. The issue that I hear you saying, Trustee DeMink, and for the record, I do value the work that you do on Parks and Rec. I know that I probably, looking to bring an agenda item like this forward, would have asked for your support and talked to you a little bit about it. I wasn't the maker of the motion. What I see here is you're proposing that before an agenda item can come to the board, it must go through all these things and get the approval. And I don't know that that's exactly what you want to do. I think if you withdraw your motion to kill this, you can do exactly what you're doing, which is to say, before we interrupt the funding stream, which potentially this does, where will we get the revenue to replace the gate, if you will, and how does that look? But I understood when I talked to Treasurer Lafata before the meeting tonight, his purpose here was you have $500,000 being allocated to that park on top of the $1.6 million that you put into the parking lot, on top of $500,000 that went into the splash pad and so forth.
Stay on me.
Yeah, I am, thank you. I can see your team is working on it, but I can finish.
We're going to have plenty of time to discuss Brandenburg
Okay.
ad nauseum. We got two big agendas.
If I could finish without being interrupted, I appreciate it. So I understand your position to remove this because it didn't go through, but what you're adding is potentially multiple layers that really leave those of us in the minority without any opportunity to even bring an agenda item forward. And that's the problem I have. I'd be more inclined to vote with you after a deliberation than I would before you kill the opportunity for somebody to speak. That's my problem with it.
Any further comments on the board? Motion by Trustee DeMink, support by Trustee Vosper to approve item 6B, the agenda with the removal of item 9A. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosper.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Treasurer Lafata.
Now,
Supervisor Eckerly.
Aye.
Clerk Berry. Aye.
Motion passes. Item 6C, which was removed from the consent agenda and will be considered now. Trustee Joseph, I believe, requested to be removed.
Thank you.
First, we'll need a motion to either discuss, deny, or approve.
Just from a procedural standpoint, I don't know that, do we need a motion to
Yeah.
approve?
Yes.
When our board rules specifically say that any consideration of a consent agenda item is done separate, all we do is ask for it to be pulled. What's the motion?
At some, you're either going to want to approve it, you're going to want to It has not been approved. We approve the consent agenda minus item 6C.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the request of the Department of Public Safety to pay an invoice in the amount of $18,000 from GL 205301864 and 205336864. This invoice is payment for implicit bias and de-escalation training for all public safety employees. Support.
Motion by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Anderson. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. What I wanted to do is, I'm aware, personally I'm aware of this training. I've had occasion to talk to the chief, but as we discuss his budget tonight, and I would really like the public to know why this training was put in place and the circumstances that are before us nationally that make this training a requirement for any forward-thinking department, and whether or not the chief anticipates this being training that will be part of your new normal. This type of training will be something, will it be something that you will be looking to incorporate in your department on an ongoing basis? Thank you.
Director Thurston.
Yes, you're correct on all of those. What we did on this occasion, though, we brought in an expert from the outside who works with Michigan Law Enforcement Commission, who sets the standards for this type of training, particularly in these two areas. He's a local professor, instructor, and an expert in this particular area. We train on these topics regularly in light of what the current national environment that we're working on. I wanted to update it, make it as current and as relevant and as quickly as I could get it into both the police and the fire department for civilian and non-civilian personnel. So as we move forward, this will be done annually, and a large presentation of this nature will be done semi-annually.
Any further follow-ups? Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Director Kirsten, is this the type of training that perhaps some of our other non-public safety employees would benefit from? And if so, would there be any additional cost savings to maybe including those individuals as well?
Yes, absolutely. This sort of training has to occur. And it's going to be mandated on the law enforcement side once the legislation is complete. I would recommend this, and I did speak with the HR director when we first made this proposal, that this be spread throughout the township. Logistically, we just couldn't schedule it. I know they had another vendor that they were working with that they were going to bring in to do this, but absolutely on our side, it's going to be a mandate, it's going to be required, and I would say that the township would seek benefit, all township employees would seek benefit from this type of training.
Just a follow-up. Director Duchesne is in the process. That will be available to the director.
Through this vendor?
Different vendor.
Thank you.
Trustee Domingue.
You want to go first, Treasurer File? I'm familiar with this training from my current employer, and a lot of departments are using this right now. It's an excellent program. The instructor's very well versed. He just finished at the department that I work on with it. So it's a great program, and in light of what's going on in today's world, I think it's a great program, and everybody needs to have it. Thank you, sir.
Treasurer File.
Is this reflected in our budget that we're looking at today?
This was not, we'll do it much cheaper next time around, we'll roll it in. A portion of it is in the 2021 budget, but this was for this year.
Because I don't remember seeing something like 18,000.
Yeah, it's a training element in the training budget.
Any further comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Motion by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Anderson to approve item 6C. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Foster. Aye. Treasurer LaFava.
Aye.
Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry. Aye.
Motion prevails. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7 is a public hearing. We do have a public hearing tonight. Item 7A.
Item 7A is to conduct a public hearing for the August 11th, 2020 regular board meeting at 7 p.m. to hear comments concerning the estimate of costs to provide police and fire protection as determined by the Township Board, and also on the distribution of the special assessment levy of said police and fire protection.
Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Joseph. To open the public hearing, Clerk Berry, please call the roll and open the public hearing.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee DeMay.
Aye.
Trustee Bosford. Aye. Treasurer LaFatta.
Aye.
Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye. The public hearing is open at 7:26 p.m. I'm going to start by a short presentation by Finance Director Bauer.
Hello. All right, so this presentation is there's some slides up there that kind of help guide you along, is the 2021 police and fire estimate costs, along with the annual special assessment public hearing. Just to start off with, is what is the purpose of this public hearing? There's two main purposes. Number one is to receive public input on the proposed estimate of cost to provide police and fire protection services. Number two is to approve the millage levy rate for 2021. This is a renewal of the current 7.95 public safety millage. I want to stress, because sometimes there's a little bit of confusion with this, this is not a new tax, this is just a renewal of what you're currently paying. We are required to bring it back every single year for the discussion. The additional thing is this is an estimate of cost, not the actual budget. We went through a lot of work to put this together, but we do a lot more in the next coming months along with the entire township, and the budget is actually approved in December. So more work and more opportunity for people to come and look at it and discuss it will be in the future. The next slide is the summary of the public safety estimate of cost. The top area is the revenue area. The millage at 7.95 that we're talking about is 93% of the total revenue that the public safety department gets. The other income, which is that $1,051,174, is about 7%. The next chunk is where the money is spent, the expenses. We broke it down into three categories. We have our police department, which is about 60% at $8,662,000 approximately. Our fire department and equipment is 31%, which is that $4,538,000 approximately. And then our dispatch and administration is that last 9% that makes up our total expenses. Our net position from this is that positive $227,950.58. It is notable, though, that the capital purchases that are within the expense budget is about that $958,000. If you take that out, you have your net operating position. Your net operating position then would be $1,186,000 approximately. The detailed level, we did send out to the board, or I did send out to the board, an actual line-by-line detailed item, and it was also included in the board presentation package, which is online if anybody wants even more good financial data. Okay, this slide here that we're looking at is our fund balance history. On January 1st of 2020, which is our last audited statement, our fund balance for public safety was at $8,338,000 approximate dollars. We are obviously still in 2020, so we don't have a completed year end, but we project that we'll have a change in the fund balance of a negative $1,100,000. A lot of that is due to all of the fire station renovations, large capital projects that we anticipated, budgeted, planned for. That will give us an ending projected budget of 2020 of $7,238,445. That then carries over to our beginning 21 balance. With our $227,950 that we're projected for 2021, that's going to give us our ending balance for 2021 of $7,466,395. We have a projected 2021 year-end fund balance as a percentage of operating budget of 55%. That's a very solid number. A lot of municipals look to be between 15 and 30%. We have a lot of different growth that we're doing, so that 55% makes us feel very comfortable with where we're at and where we're going. Our next slide This here just kind of gives us more of a visual of what we're talking about, because again, really what we're looking at is that what are we going to levy for that 21 year? So again, if it's at 93% of our total revenue, that's our, blue line is our total revenue. That red line is the 93% that we're getting from property taxes. And then that green is everything else, at 7% approximately. That's reimbursements from dispatch, grants, fines, fees, interest, miscellaneous. But even all of that stuff combined is just such a small portion of what we actually operate our public safety department on. Our next slide. This is just a quick history on the property tax, that 93% that we're talking about. Where has it been? Where is it going? You're going to see we had 1 year of an actual total dollar decline, and that was in 2018. So the blue line is our actual revenue that we received from that property tax revenue. The red line is our projected. We projected it as staying that status quo of 7.95. You can actually see kind of towards the bottom, it says rate in mills, or our millage rate. We had a high collection, and this, prior to the public safety fund, we had the police, the fire, and the fire equipment. Those are combined, so that total there is going to be the combined rate of what we were collecting for essentially our public safety. We had 8.25, that's our high. Our current you'll see on that 2020 is the 7.95, which we're currently doing. And again, like I keep saying, the proposed is status quo at 7.95. So we overall, in the last 15 to current, have had a 0.3 reduction in the millage rate. I think that about covers my brief summary of it. I don't know if anybody has any more specific targeted questions.
When we get to, we're going to do how this is going to work is right now is the public hearing piece. So we're going to strictly hear from the public with no interaction from the board during this public hearing. However, first item on the regular agenda is an action item to pass a resolution, one declaring the rate, the millage rate that we're going to assess under 2020 winter taxes, and two, discuss the preliminary budget. So as of right now, if you have any comments for the public hearing, state your name and address for the record, and you can make your general comments. And then again, there'll be an action item on this again, where we can we'll address a lot of your questions. So come on up to the board or the podium at the end here. I'm going to have Clerk Perry read in the questions that were submitted electronically or via mail.
My name is Gary Thomas. I live at 51800 Baker Road. Good evening. As I stated, my name is Gary Thomas, and I am the current president of the Friends of Chesterfield Police. Let me preface my commentary by saying that every member of our group was given a chance to review my remarks, and most every one of them is in agreement with everything I am about to say. Our mission statement states that our main goal is to promote and support the men and women of the Chesterfield Police Department. Aside from our support of the K-9 unit, the bowling fundraisers, and the numerous other programs that we're involved in, our main concern at this time is the funding and staffing of the Public Safety Department. I did a little research, and what I found is a definite eye-opener. Chesterfield is approximately 30 square miles in area. The 2010 population was 43,381. Projected population for 2020 is 46,680. That's 3,000 more people, a 7.6% increase in less than 10 years. The total police and fire allowance in 2006 were $11,388,616. For 2017, this number grew to $11,648,647, a whopping 2.2% increase in 11 years. Our group is not here to brag about all of our accomplishments. However, we would like to proclaim our most important accomplishment to date. In case you haven't noticed, the community of Chesterfield is definitely appreciative of the current PD. Lead proof, the last police open house that we were allowed to have last year, 2019, drew close to 5,000 people. I don't believe for a minute that they were there for the free hot dogs. I myself experienced many citizens who came with an unfavorable attitude only to leave with a much improved disposition. The document published by the state of Michigan for townships contains the following statement, and I quote, "Michigan townships, large and small, provide services tailored to meet the needs of their residents. Township officers represent the level of government closest to and most responsive to the wishes of the people." Let me repeat that last line, the wishes of the people. So as we debate the allocation of our tax dollars, please let us determine just what is most important. Fish habitats, empty parks, and bike paths are all very nice assets to cling to the newspapers. But what good of any of these if people do not feel safe to use them? Detroit has or had many beautiful parks, Baldock Park, Chandler Park, and the most famous of all, Belle Isle. Would you picnic there? The community consisting of over 30 square miles is patrolled at any given time by 3 officers. That's right, 1 car every 10 square miles. Seems ridiculous, but it's a reality. Our neighbor, Clinton Township, consists of 28 square miles. They employ 105 officers. We have 42, including the chief. Unbelievable, but it's true. With 3,000 more residents, many large businesses moving in, and 3 new senior citizens established, we need more first responders, and we need them now. When the Public Safety Department was initiated, many were angry. Even the firefighters were up in arms over the changes. Reviewing some of the changes, most would agree, hopefully including the firefighters, that the fire department has definitely improved. Now we need to improve the PD. Before I exceed my 5 minutes, let me just summarize by saying, a growing community such as ours needs to provide an adequate public safety department first and foremost above any other budget allocation for any of the rest of the programs to succeed. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Do they need the speaker to this one? I'm going to have Clerk Barry, we will come up with other public comments, read in the names and addresses of the letters we have received.
Letters of protest of the police SAD police SAD assessment are as follows. Colette Basilli, Bussilli, no address given. Josephine Aubel, Aubel, at 50314 Vinecrest Lane, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48047. Lawrence Charon, Charron, at 34349 Country Meadow Road, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48047. Ken Novick, Novik, at 28807 Wales Court, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48047. Stephen Bodner, Bodner, at 52582 Sass Road, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48047. Carrie Lane Kirkwood, LAINEKIRKWOOD, address 54410 Chesterfield Road, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48051. Ann Markham, MARKHAM, address 47760 Harbor Drive, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48047. Richard Markham, MARKHAM, address 47760 Harbor Drive, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48047. And Janet Scottson, SKOCZEN, address 47356 Mariners Point, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48051, all against.
Any further public comment? This is a public hearing.
Yeah, my name is Anthony Shore, 53270 Sam's Lane, Chesterfield, Michigan. I guess the question is, I'm trying to understand what the special assessment is. Do we have a basic budget for public safety? Or is the whole public safety, fire, a special assessment?
It's a special assessment. We'll answer your questions at the end. It's a special assessment district.
Okay,
Without, I'm not going to do any more questions because this, our normal protocol is we'll answer them at the end.
you're not going to answer the question.
At the end, we will. That's our board rules.
Well, the only comment I have to make then, over and above that, I was just looking at my tax bill that I received for the summer. It's up 11%, and I assume everybody's is up 11%. And I'm trying to understand that in the current economic situation with 2% inflation, and my tax bill goes up 11%. It doesn't compute. My property hasn't gone up 11%. And we're talking here about, you know, a special assessment tax, which is all fine and good, it's great. Public safety is important, but if that's going to, again, it says it's not going to increase my taxes, I don't understand. It's probably part of my tax bill right now, and I won't see an increase next year when you pass the special assessment. At least that's what I'm understanding. But is there a basic budget? Is there a basic police budget? I'd like to know that. And if this special assessment is over and above that, or is the whole police budget a special assessment? And if it is that way, well, how is it controlled? How do you control, as it increases over the years, how do you control that? You know, we're in an economic crisis right now, whether you want to recognize it or not, as a township. There's a lot of people unemployed. You know, we're going to continue spending money. You know, I'm looking at this. We're going to spend $1 million on parks. Maybe it needs it. I'm not saying, I don't know. I haven't gone in there and looked. And then we're going to buy laptop computers and equipment. And there's a lot of people unemployed in this township right now. Property taxes, as I said, mine are going up 11%. I don't see where this is going. Is it going to get worse over time? I didn't look back 5 years, but I'll bet you my property taxes are up 20% in 5 years. And over those 5 years, the inflation rate's probably less than 10%. So something's wrong, something doesn't compute in this. And, you know, I'm not saying we don't need public safety, but all the other money we're spending on all the other things, is that being guided by prudence? In other words, do you go to your department surveyor and say, I want a 10% back? How many people have you laid off? Have you laid off anybody in this economic situation? You know, there's a lot of things that are left unspoken. I'm in total agreement with having a special assessment if that's totally it for funding the police department and the fire department. But I'm against it if it's over and above what we would normally spend for police and fire. It doesn't make any sense to me. And from a fiduciary standpoint, I'm just asking, have you cut your budget at all this year? Have you asking for your new budgets? Are you asking them to cut 10% on their budgets? Are we doing that as a township? Or do you do that every year, or you don't do that at all? In other words, it just keeps going bigger and bigger and bigger, the money you're spending, and is funded by property taxes. So that's my concern right now. I don't really understand what your special assessment is because you haven't explained it in detail from an economic standpoint. Am I against it? No, I'm not against it if I can understand it. Right now, to send a little 3x5 card to somebody's home and talk about special assessments, the first thing you think about is a tax increase. Now, the question is it? Is it going to be more than it was last year? And the bottom line is, why are the property taxes up from summer to summer 11%? It doesn't make any sense. Now, you can blame the state on that or whatever. I've gone to these tax meetings, and the answer I generally get at these tax meetings is, well, the state raised it. That's not an excuse. I mean, the state raised it, so automatically it's all right. So I guess the bottom line is I'll sit and listen, see what the special assessment is about if somebody's willing to explain it. I've seen the budget. That's all great and good, but I don't know if it's a good budget or a bad budget. Does anybody? You know, it's just all the money we gotta spend. Maybe we gotta spend more money. Maybe we gotta spend less money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public?
Cindy Glass, 379 Wacker Drive, Chesterfield, 40051. I just want to say that I really think we need to be supporting our police as much as possible, especially considering the national environment. They have a really tough job, and they're taking a lot of stuff. And I would be willing to pitch in a little bit more for a raise for them. That's all I have to say.
Further public comment?
My name is Joe Cage. I live at 32825 Sutton Road. Basically, I think the 7.95 millage request is in line with what you need for your budget. My problem is that basically you're still running under the Act 51 proposal, which allows you in future years, as things get tougher, property tax devalues, allows you to increase the millage rate another 2% or increase it by 25% without a vote from the public. And I'd like to go over is how we got to this point with the Act 51 to begin with. Back in about 2014, because the property taxes were dropping, the police budget request didn't drop, and things started running in the red. There was a lot of things looked at that weren't accepted. First one was headcount reduction. Nobody wanted to look at that. You had a $50,000 study saying how could you reduce your costs of the police department. They came out with three things. It said, get rid of the jail, the 9/11 operations, give them back to the county, and then we reduce one patrolman per shift. That was not accepted. The other one was contract with the sheriff. Basically, give him everything, the whole thing. And he would probably, if we laid off your police department, we would have probably have to hire every one of them to get what we needed. And you just pay him. And essentially it would have come in cheaper. The board wouldn't even talk or get quotes from the sheriff. Then you gave a $3 million loan from the general fund in, I guess, 2017, which was supposed to be a loan, and it's been forgiven. And then you incorporated the Public Act 51. And what that allowed you to do was combine all of the protection and dig into that $10 million, almost $11 million money fund that you had in the fire equipment fund, which is now, I guess, down to, you burned through over $3 million in the last couple of years on that to help carry the police budget. And also when you did that, there was another thing that involved that I couldn't understand. You had the opportunity with that $10 million budget in there to utilize the fire department to do what they were doing, only actually buy them the equipment and give them the training to do it, and that was do medical response. According to the numbers I heard when the chief went through the study,
Fire department had 3,800 calls in that particular year. 3,600 were medical related. 200 were fire or otherwise. But when you consolidated them, you turned around, you took that performance away from the fire department. So essentially, they're now doing 5% of the runs that they did previously. You have a public safety department that you're saying is for the safety of the public. You took that responsibility away. You now gave it to MedStar, that's outside contractor. He does it, you pay him, I don't remember, it was like $40 million. They have 3 ambulances on site all the time instead of our own people. And you've got people in those ambulances, you don't even know who they are. They're hired by the ambulance people. Whereas if you had that in the fire department, and you could have done it with the money that was available, you'd have a true safety department. The other thing I wanted to look at is the fact, had you contracted with the county, like I say, nobody wanted to look at it, nobody wanted to talk to the sheriff or anything, it probably would have been, I think our total budget for the police was right around $10 million that we weren't covering from property taxes. Macomb County contracted with them. They get 30 officers, a sheriff, not a sheriff, a lieutenant and a sergeant. Gives them 6 cars on the road around the clock. I don't know what we're running. We were running 4. I don't know if we're running any more than that now. But it gives them 6 cars on the road and they pay for 2 9/11 operators. And it costs them $5.4 million. Now you got 4 more, you got more policemen. I don't know if you're getting any more service for them. And it's costing you, what was it, I remember, and not including any equipment that's being purchased from the former fire fund. It's costing you right around $9 million. So you could still have a police department, you could still be a police department booster, and have that for a lot cheaper. And you could have your own fire department that would respond to that. So I guess my request is, how many cars are they running on the road every day? Is it up to 6 now, or is it less than 6 like it was before? And the other thing is, what's it going to take? Because the budget seems to be running okay with the amount of property tax you're getting, to get off of the Act 51 and get back to the old taxes that are still in place, police, fire, and fire equipment, and run with that and see how you do with that. Now that, you know, you funded, what, $6 million basically to save the police department for this time. What's it going to take to get back to the stuff that the voters have approved, so that the next time this happens, you go back to the people and say, we need more money, but we can take it from, you know, we can change it. Instead of 5 mils for the police department, we can get 6 mils, but we'll take less for the fire equipment. There's other ways of doing this so that people still have a say in how much they're being taxed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board?
Good evening, board. My name is Michelle Merriweather, and that's 52860 Muirfield Drive in Chesterfield. I just wanted to make a comment on this agenda item. I know this is for an estimate of cost, correct? Okay. So I just wanted to put it out to say, number one, for myself and for the population that I'm representing today, we are in full support of our men and women in blue. Very much a support. We've always had a great relationship with our men and women in blue in Chesterfield, and I thank you for that. The biggest question I have, and I know that this will be answered later, as our supervisor said, is that the gentleman said earlier, it's more of a question of how this is going to affect us as residents in terms of our property taxes and our taxes itself. And I think that's the biggest question out there. But otherwise, I just wanted to say that the other piece I had a question about, you did answer, because that would figure into support as well. And I was very happy to see that there was a bias and de-escalation training that has taken place, and I applaud you for that. Thank you. And overall, I just wanted to say again that the biggest question I have and the populations I'm representing is how this will affect us and costs for our property, et cetera, for next year. Otherwise, again, we're in full support of our men and women in blue. Thanks.
Any further comments from the public?
Mr. Supervisor, before I start, I've got a couple requests. Two of them are from the residents and one's from myself personally. One of the first requests from the residents is they ask that board members refrain from texting when residents are addressing you. And then number two is, which was a huge request that I got, is were we able to solve the audio and video issues? Because it seems like when certain individuals come up here, there's always an audio or a visual issue. And then number three is I'm going to ask you if you could personally refrain from the 30-second mark. I have my own timer, so I'll know when my 5 minutes are up.
You have no time here, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you. Good evening, Township Board and residents. My name is John Speaka. Chesterfield Township is a booming and growing community. I'm very proud to call Chesterfield my home. Not only is Chesterfield my home, but I'm committed to serve in this community. As a growing and booming community, we have to plan ahead for what lies ahead. When my wife and I were looking for a community to call home, we had a list of items that were important to us. At the top of our list was police and fire protection. How long would it take an officer to respond to an emergency? Schools, how are the schools rated? Property taxes compared to our neighboring communities. Senior center, do we have anything for our seniors? Water rates, city services, nearby hospitals, and what did the community offer for parks and recs? Important items for us when considering the purchase of a new home and a new community. As a township, I believe we have a lot of great things to offer anyone considering Chesterfield as their new home. There's a saying that says when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I'm tough, this community is tough, our men and women and our police and fire department are tough. I believe in leading by example. Leading by example is the Speaka way. As a proven leader in the private sector, I will always find a way to get things done. Failure is not an option. Leaders lead, followers follow, and puppets dance to their master's tune. If an individual doesn't have the leadership ability or track record of getting things done, they are not going to bring the residents the results they deserve. Chesterfield Township, police and fire play a vital role in our community by keeping our neighborhoods safe and protecting all of us. I assure all the residents and all of our men and women in police and fire that John Speaka supports you, respects your bravery, and I thank all of you for the sacrifices that you and your family make every day. I have your backs. I'm not for defunding our police and fire, but for funding our police and fire. Our first responders put their lives on the line each and every day for all of us, and I will support you by funding you. I want to address a question that one of the residents asked as far as funding. He said, are we adding 10% to our funding? Are we cutting anything? I think the question that we should be asking is how many more additional people are we putting on the payroll? Why are we circumventing the unions and adding people of friends in the township on our payroll? That might be a question to ask. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Going once, going twice. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
My name is Anna Chaudhry, 50220 Sass Road, Chesterfield. I think it is a good time to evaluate how things have been done, to really look at how money is being spent and if it's benefiting everyone. I spoke with a man who had the police called on him in a neighborhood he had lived in for 20 years for helping with a fundraiser. His daughter was going to go to Carnegie Hall. And a neighbor saw him out going to people's doors, collecting the cans that they had left out to help with the fundraiser. Well, he got the police called on him, and she came out with her guns blazing and wouldn't listen, and luckily he was able to name drop her superior officer and was able to de-escalate the situation. So I feel like there is situations, even in our small town, that do happen. So that is the fear some people in our community are under. He was told, oh, she's just a hothead. Well, I don't want hotheads in our police department. I value police officers that know how to de-escalate situations, and I'm really happy to hear about the funding you're putting into the training for de-escalation. Many of the cases of police brutality throughout the country are of officers that had many complaints against them for excessive use of force. I think there should be a panel of citizens of all ethnicities and genders to evaluate complaints of officers of excessive use of force or discrimination. With oversight, we can ensure that these tragedies don't happen in our community. Let's work together to ensure everyone is treated with respect and dignity. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? We'll do the countdown again. Once, twice. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Clerk Berry. Support by Trustee Anderson to close the public hearing. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Bosberg. Aye. Treasurer Lafado.
Aye.
Supervisor Eckerly.
Aye. The public hearing is closed at 8:03 p.m. Item 8 is the regular agenda. Item 8A.
Item 8A is an approval to establish the estimate of costs to provide police and fire protection as determined by the Township Board and the amount of special assessment levy, as well as direct the Township Supervisor to spread the assessment levy on the taxable value of all lands and premises within the district for the year 2021 and adopt resolution number 2020-26.
Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item 8A, setting the special assessment levy at 7.95.
Motion by Trustee
Support.
Joseph. Support by Trustee Domingue. Discussion. And there are a couple of questions there that I think we should answer. Trustee Joseph.
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor,
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, if it's acceptable, I'd like to take a shot at trying to briefly answer the comments that were raised. I'll catch as many as I can, and I think Trustee Domingue is taking notes down there, and he's prepared to answer some, and I know other board members are as well. So first, I'd like to commend the president of Friends of Chesterfield Police. There is an outstanding executive board. There are a number of individuals who are in this room who were here in this room in 2015 when we started this organization, and the Friends of Chesterfield Police were started because our police department was on the ropes. Our police department was really in very, very bad trouble. There were layoff notices that had gone out at one point, and a moratorium was formed to look at the ways in which we could save our department. The Friends of Chesterfield Police was formed after a very difficult time in our township history involving some failed villages. And that organization was able to bring together everybody in this community from all political parties, wherever you stood on the issue involving the millage, black, white, male, female, gay, straight, you name it, we all came together. And what we agreed upon was that we needed an ambassador. We needed an army of ambassadors to go out and talk to the residents about what it is that we do. If a municipality cannot tell its residents the value of the product, they should not be surprised if the product is not supported with a millage increase. So the Friends of Chesterfield Police, we set about in those early days to form an organization to really go out and just be ambassadors of our department. Everybody is welcomed at those meetings, and it continues to grow. I am very, very proud of not only founding that, but being its first president and then turning it over to an apolitical group. Nobody on the executive board is running for office, and we wanted it that way specifically. Friends of Chesterfield Police do not get involved in political campaigns, and they don't endorse individual candidates. What they do is they show up at meetings like this, and they say, you will not cut our police department, because we believe that without a vibrant Chesterfield Police Department and Fire Department, there is not a vibrant Chesterfield Township. That's why they're here, and that's why they show up in support of their public safety. So excellent job conveying that message, President Thomas, and I would note that your executive board is here tonight in complete support, as a number of your members as well. Mr. Shore, the question about the SAD and is this a tax increase, it is not, and hopefully Mr. Shore will be able to hear the answers to his questions if he's already left. This is not a budget increase. This is not a tax increase. The special assessment district, and I'll let others speak to this, particularly Mr. LaFata, since he's the architect of how we came to the SAD process to begin with. What we had was a very complicated millage, a bifurcated millage in the fire department that allowed us to levy taxes approximately 3.5 mils thereabouts, with some of the millage levy for equipment and other for operations. And what we found in that very restrictive millage scenario is that we had imbalances in the fund balance. So we had millions and millions of dollars of extra money for equipment and firefighters that we could not pay. So it was very restrictive in how it could be spent. And Ms. Bauer, our financial director, and our Plant Moran auditors can tell you that there's a very, very complicated system about what's an approved expense and what isn't. So this imbalance that was created with very well-intentioned architects in the beginning grew a fund balance that was obscenely high, and then a fund balance that you couldn't operate day to day with personnel. The police department was operating on a special assessment district that was a standalone. And what we tried to do was to combine the two millages in the fire department and the special assessment money in the police department to form one special assessment district. If we would have combined all of those together, we were operating at approximately 8.23, and we rounded that to 8 in our deliberations. We felt that the fund balances that were available in the fire department, together with the 8 mils that we would collect in the future years, would provide enough flexibility to spend down the fire department fund balances and cover the cost of operations. That's how we've been operating since 2017 when the SAD was formed. And the part of the SAD that causes problems when you get that little card that says come to the public hearing is because we entered into a covenant, if you will, and the requirement is that every year we must, as a board, tell you how we're spending your money. Did you give us too much? Do we not have enough? And we go through that process in a public hearing, and we allow people to come in, ask questions, and then we answer them. Right now we're operating at 7.95. That is the proposed amount that we continue to operate at. So Mr. Shore, there is no budget increase. As your taxes have gone up, I would ask you to take a look at the school district that you might be residing in, because the township does not really impose any taxes in anything near
the amount other than the SAD that we're here for tonight, and the proposal is not to increase that. Ms. Glass, she came forward and spoke in affirmation of her police department. I commend her for that. Mr. Kadish had a number of questions, some of which have been answered at previous meetings. But in short, there's a reason that I would never be in favor of entertaining the Sheriff's Department. The comparison to Macomb Township is not a fair comparison. If you look geographically, Macomb Township is in essence a perfect square. It's a very small community and it's much more dense than Chesterfield Township. The ability to police Macomb Township, and if you spend some time talking to our officers who study deployment maps and hotspots, you will see that Macomb Township does not have Gratiot Avenue intersecting it. It does not have I-94 intersecting it. And so when you have 6 miles of interstate uniquely positioned between 2 international bridge crossings, you will see an increase in potential crime, including drug trafficking, that Macomb Township never deals with. The other thing about Macomb Township, as you look at their borders, if they were to be in the middle of a very difficult situation, all points of the compass, north, south, east, and west, they can receive mutual aid. They can take advantage of a relationship between neighboring departments who will swarm into Macomb Township if anything gets really ugly. If you notice, there are areas in our township where mutual aid is not really going to happen for us. Nobody is coming to our rescue from the east as we border Lake St. Clair. And then there are areas of the township where if you try to traverse east to west, you can't get across I-94. So if you're coming from 24 Mile Road on the west side of 94 and you need to get over into Miss Meriwether sub, good luck. You're not going to do that. It's a very difficult thing to do. So there are unique difficulties with policing Chesterfield. We would never truly know how many cars are in Chesterfield Township at any given time because communities that contract with the Sheriff's Department recognize that those cars are fluid. They may go in and out of jurisdictions throughout the course of their shift, so they go where they're needed. There's a whole host of reasons why that wasn't a viable option for me and many people who share my opinion. The cost of doing business in the fire department, Mr. Kadich raised an issue with regard to the ambulance service. It was something that was talked about at great length. Trustee Anderson and I spent many, many hours with firefighters and Chief Charbonneau at the time because we wanted to know as well, would that be a revenue generator or could it be revenue neutral or would it cost the township residents money? And then could we make the argument that it was an increased service and would they be interested in increased service if it cost more? These were fully vetted. We went all the way down the line, and the difficulty for us was not only was there a massive equipment and training, but you also have to look at the demographics of your department, and it's really important to talk to the union members who would be required to provide those services. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but we would have a massive overhaul of training. We do not currently have paramedics to the extent that we could run a full ambulance service, and that was something that was a bit of a deal breaker at the time. So what we opted to do, if you recall also, we had an unfortunate timing of the closure of the fire station on Jefferson, and we didn't want our residents left in the lurch, so we expanded and increased our contract with MedStar to make sure that we had ambulances in the township should they be needed. That was not free, and it did result in approximately a $250,000 expansion of that contract, but MedStar services have been exemplary, and we monitor those frequently and get reports from the chief on a regular basis. Public Safety Director. Ms. Meriwether was next to speak, and I appreciated her comments with regard to the increase in training. I'm not sure when, Ms. Meriwether, you said the people that you represent and that you were appreciative. I know from just kind of watching other candidates, I know one of the people you represent is a police officer and your family who you're extremely proud of, and I know your support for the police department. But I don't know when you talk about the population you represent if you're president of your homeowners, but in this township, as your representative on this board, it matters not to me your political party, your sexual orientation, your religion, the color of your skin. I represent every member of this community. And when we had problems in our county, not too many months ago, there was a protest and a rally on M59. It started in Sterling Heights. If you recall, there was talk of that protest extending into Chesterfield. And there were individuals who were interested in seeing a presence of Black Lives Matter, and they wanted a demonstration here in the township to talk about injustices. I was out the night of the protest, and I was at the prescribed meeting place, and I was glad to see that I was not alone, because our our public safety director, Kirsten, was out with the individuals at the corner of Anchor and Jefferson, talking with them about what they envision for our township as it relates to the police department. It was a great meeting, and I did everything that I could to talk to residents in the surrounding area to say, people with opposing viewpoints than yours, it's critical that you hear and listen to them. This is one Chesterfield. And for our police chief to take it upon himself to get out there and embrace that crowd was very special to me. So it has zero to do with your race, with your gender, with your religion. We are one Chesterfield. I'm proud of this department for that, always putting that first, and that extends to the fire department as well. Mr. Speaker, I agree with you. We are not in a position to defund this department. The 7.95 represents the minimum level of funding. It's the level of funding that we passed last year, down from 8.0. And I think when we look at the numbers, and I have a basket full of numbers if we get to the point where we talk numbers, but the reality is we're still operating at pre-2008 staffing levels, and we have 10 to 15,000 more people in this township, and our public safety are doing a hell of a job on the revenue that they have. We cannot cut that, and I'm glad to see Trustee Domingue supporting the motion to keep it at 7.95. Ms. Chowdhury got up and spoke next. She mentioned a fundraiser in her neighborhood. I'd like to talk with her more about that because I think you're describing an incident that perhaps is an individual act involving a particular officer, and the takeaway on a global scale, on a macro level, was very well made. I know it was difficult for you to speak. I could tell when you got up to speak, you debated on whether or not you were going to come to the podium. I'm glad that you did, because the more people that talk about areas where we could do better, the better we become. You're not to be anything but commended for having the courage to come forward and talk about an incident in your neighborhood that you think could expand to an area that could be problematic for the community you love. So proud of you for coming forward, and I agree with you that we do need to investigate that. I could look back and see Captain Franks taking notes, and I can tell that there's some interest in finding out a little bit more about your concerns. Overall, in closing, in round one of closing, I'm not sure where the debate goes tonight. I was deeply hurt last year about this time when we went from 8 mils to 7.95. It represented a very small reduction in the budget, but there were individuals who were very proud of being tax cutters. And I wrote letters to every union officer in the police and fire, and I said to them that I will not go back on the deal that we brokered in 2017. And the deal that we brokered, make no mistake about it, the Chesterfield Fire Department saved the Chesterfield Police Department. There was no way that we would be in the position that we are in without the firefighters, their chief, their union officers, their rank and file, saying our brothers and sisters in blue need our help. They do what firefighters instinctively do, they rescue. They rescued the Chesterfield Police Department. I sat with their union officials, including their IAFF regional president, and he said, every year you will have a process where you can tell your public what the benefit of our department is. Do not let us down. The fear then was that politicians would use the fund balances to artificially talk about tax cutting. And it's exactly what happened. And so last year when I went to them individually and I said, this hurts me, I can't support it. A couple of them came to me on the side and they said it's about an $80,000 hit. It's not going to topple our department. But it was the point of what we were saying to the people in the public safety department. You can't talk about increasing property value and how they're getting more money. They're not back to where they should be, and we're still in trouble. We don't need to increase the rate, but we can't play games with it. And about 6 months ago, as we were working into an election year, and people started talking about tax cutting, I said, absolutely not. Trustee Anderson said, absolutely not. And we went to the Friends of Chesterfield Police, we went to our neighbors, we went to the Citizens Academy graduates, and we said to all those people that love and value the Chesterfield Police Department and the Chesterfield Fire Department, we cannot defund. On any level, we cannot defund the Chesterfield Public Safety team. Gradually, what's happened after letters to the editor and a very, very ugly campaign that cost Treasurer Lafata his seat in November, we successfully saved the funding at its appropriate level, and make no mistake about it, it's because you're here in this room, and that's what politicians respond to. Be here every time. Come here every time. We'll have another one next year, and we'll have another one the year after that. Without a strong public safety team, we are not Chesterfield Township. You're here. We saved the budget. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the residents who showed up tonight to voice their opinion on the resolution and the taxes. Trustee Joseph said it well. Like I said, it's not a tax increase, it's just a renewal of the 7.95 millage. One issue I will address, Trustees Anderson, Joseph, Clerk Berry have been up here for 8 years. I'm going on 16. Mr. Kadich, every year the county comes up for contracting. And we have stood strong with the guys from Chesterfield PD. I've supported them. Those of you who don't know, I came from the Sheriff's Department. I spent 25 years there. I retired 18 years ago, and I work for another PD. And I said it 2 meetings ago, I supported the guys from Chesterfield. They all know I do. Director Kirsten and I go back 30 years ago, working together. We were both young guys on the road. So Chesterfield PD, I support you guys. The issue with the county, it's been coming up every year for the 16 years I've been here. 3 of you at the other end, you know it's been coming up for the 8 years you've been up here. So my stand is, that's why David made the motion, I supported it, 7.95 mils. And men and women of the department do a great job. Fire department guys do a great job. Director Kirsten does a great job. Like I say, we've known each other over 30 years because we work together. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I want to encounter Mr. Brown too. Just Trustee Glassberg. Go ahead.
And like I said, the county's a great place to work. The men and women at the depths, Sheriff Wickersham, personal friend of mine, they do a great job. They have no animosities toward us. Everybody works. And Director Kirsten will say the same thing. If they need something, he can call the sheriff. They'll help them out. But we have our own PD. We have our own dispatch. It's established, and we're standing. Okay? Thank you.
Trustee Glassberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I come from the county government. I've been a county commissioner for 14 years, and I would concur with what's already been said. The Macomb County Sheriff Department is not a good fit for our community. Our residents have made it very clear, and I would agree, having lived here since the fact that we do want and support our own department. I wanted to address a couple of questions that were brought up. I think that I'm wondering if perhaps Mr. Shore was asking about the general fund, or didn't use that term, but he wanted to know, is this an additional expenditure, and does our general fund support it? The general fund does not include expenditures for public safety. It is a separate, has always been a separate funding source, either through a millage or through a special assessment district. So that part has not changed in that you are charged, you're billed on your tax bill, you will see a separate section for public safety. Someone, I think it was the same person, had mentioned a huge increase in the summer tax bill, and that was because the voters approved a 1.9 mil increase for the Macomb Intermediate School District. And that's why we all saw a huge increase that was due to the Intermediate School District that was voter approved. And then, so that for someone who has, let's say, a $200,000 valued house, your taxable value, I'm oversimplifying, would be about $100,000. That's a $190 increase just for that school millage. So that's why so many of us saw that huge increase this past summer due to the school. That's all I have. Thank you.
Treasurer Lafava.
Some of Mr. Shore's questions were answered. The only increase you get on your property taxes, other than the ISD millage that was voted on by the electorate, is the fact that you are reassessed every year on your property value. Unless you bought a new home, that value should be capped so that your increase isn't going to be more than, I think it's 2%. The other thing is the Public Safety Department has made a lot of improvements since it's become the public safety. They made economic improvements. Captain Ken Franks and Captain Brian McNair did a lot of rescheduling and a lot of shuffling, which helped save the Public Safety Department a large amount of overtime. The change to MedStar cut down on overtime also, because when you can't empty a station out, you have to call and back up. MedStar also, if you look at the stats that our Director Kirsten has as far as response time, they're much better before there was a public safety department. MedStar actually brings a benefit to the township. If you're in really bad shape, they have a helicopter. They can get you from here to the University of Michigan helipad in about 20 minutes, which is definitely, if you're a cardiac patient and you needed something like that, it's a place you want to go, and MedStar can get you there. So there's some cost, and then there's some benefits. Tax value in the township still has not recovered. The actual taxable value for the whole township is still $200,000 short of the 2008 assessed property values. So taxes proportionately for your public safety has not gone up. Thank you.
Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I think that if we take a look at the history as well as the current conditions in the Public Safety Department, I think it'll be clear to all of us that we should support Resolution 2020-26. As Trustee Deming pointed out, myself, Trustees Joseph, Anderson, and Deming have been here through the lean times in the first 4 years since 2012, and we saw some of the wrong directions that leadership in the police department was taking at the time, and I know that several of us spoke out about that and knew that some changes needed to be made. In 2017, Director Kirsten, then Police Chief Kirsten, came into my office and he showed me a model for a public safety department, a way that he saw could make considerable improvements and solve some of the problems with regards to funding and operational issues in our public safety in total, police and fire. And what I found, what I learned that day was that Director Kirsten not only had a police background, he had a fire background as well. So if he hadn't walked in with a ton of credibility to begin with, which he did, he also demonstrated knowledge of fire operations as well as police operations. And I really liked the model that he showed. I thought, and I agreed with him that I believe that was a way out, that was a way through some of the challenges that we had had. And he said to me, he said, you know, Clerk Barry, I want to show you this. He said, I'm very excited about this model. It's used in various other communities, and I think it will work here. And I agreed. I said, I would too. He said, the only problem is the funding mechanism. I don't know how we fund it. And so I would like your help in figuring out how we schedule, how we structure the funding. And we began to have a conversation about that, and then hence the discussion of the SAD as opposed to multiple millages. And we laid out a plan, and I said, let me discuss this with the township attorney. I believe this is how we can do it. And he said, that's fantastic. We can do that. I've got the operational piece. You've got the structural piece. At that time, Treasurer LaFada was walking down the hall outside the office, and I called him in. I said, Paul, could you come in for a minute? I want to show you something. And I was very excited about it. And then I asked Police Chief Kirsten at the time to explain to Treasurer LaFada as well what he had showed me. And he was very excited as well. And he said, I can crunch these numbers. He said, let me do some work, let me crunch the numbers. And he did a deep dive into the numbers. And he said, let me get back with you, but I think this will work. So we were all very excited about that. Again, Police Chief Kirsten, his piece of that was the operational piece. My piece was, that I was tasked with, was the funding structure. And then Treasurer LaFada assisted with all of the deep dive into the numbers and demonstrating by the numbers that this could work. There were people that were skeptical about it at the time, but I believe we demonstrated that if we implemented the operational changes and that if we set up the funding structure properly, that we would be able to give residents every year the opportunity to review what the costs as well as the revenues would be. And it would also allow us to adjust and flex what was needed where. So it gave who would be the new public safety director the ability to be flexible and to respond to the needs of the community on an annual basis. And that solved a lot of concerns, but it also provided a lot of benefit. And I think that we have seen that now come to fruition here. We see that if we will fund the department at 7.95 mils, that will actually result in almost $250,000 surplus. So not only will the department be fully funded, it will also have a surplus for the first time in several years. So we've actually been able to demonstrate that that model was the direction to go and that it works. And it works here for us as it's worked in other communities. And I remember saying to Chief Kirsten at the time, I said, can you do this for 8 mils or less? Everything you're showing us. Because right now we're just a little over 8 mils, as Trustee Joseph pointed out back then. And I said, can you do it for 8 mils or less? And he said, if I can implement this operational model, and if the funding structure is set up that way, yes, I can, absolutely. And he's been able to do it. So again, I think a great testament not only to all of the people who played parts in it. We did have a challenge, as been pointed out, with our fire department, but Trustee Joseph came in and kind of saved the day on that one and helped them understand that this wasn't going to hurt them and this could only help them. And everybody came together and made that work. So everyone had a piece to play, and I think that what we see here and why we should support this resolution is we have seen what happens when people work together and see when a good plan comes together and you have people that are properly motivated for it. So I think that when we're looking at a almost $28,000 surplus for the first time in the police department in a long time, we need to adopt Resolution 2020-26 at 7.95 mils. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Before you start round 2 here, I just want to mention the good work that the Friends of Chesterfield have done throughout the last few years. A couple of issues were brought up about negative experience involving one of our officers. But I'm looking at the big picture, the positive, and I'm sure finishing that thought, Trustee Davis, or Joseph has talked about it, and the chief captain back there will take care of it. I believe the Friends have given an opportunity for our officers and the community to interact. As Mr. Thomas mentioned, our last open field police day we had in May of last year, there was over 5,000 people in attendance. They had an opportunity to interact with our officers. And that's very important as far as community policing, getting to know your officers. It's not an army of occupation. These are, in most cases, are also our neighbors also. I do want to thank Treasurer Lofato, Bird Dog this process, checked out the SAG process, checked with our attorneys, and Mr. Joseph. The two of them did a yeoman's job on it. Basically, what little I had, Mr. Joseph was talking to some union people to see if we could make it fly. And those two individuals, without a doubt, did the extensive heavy lifting as far as this SAG goes. Thank you.
No community, and if any of you heard of any of my state of the townships, from the moment I walked in the door, or any of the missions in what we're charged with as a local community, whether you're a city, township, or village, public safety falls on cities, townships, and villages. That's our responsibility. The tax question. We are the collection agency for 55 mills of property taxes, depending on where you live. If you're homesteaded, that number's about 38 mills. And however, a vast majority of those tax dollars, and I think this was from Mr. Schur, and it was answered a little bit more, goes to the schools, goes to the county, and the various taxing agencies that touch Macomb County. So when it comes to property taxes, to fund Chesterfield Township government, there are two of them. One is to fund public safety in its entirety. There is zero other direct funding into public safety. Without a property tax levy, there would be zero funding for our public safety department. The other piece of property taxes that go directly to the township, which is down to 0.77 mils out of that 38, goes into our general fund. And it is a very small portion of our general fund, but that's that's Chesterfield Township's take on our property taxes. Now, everyone goes to see Treasurer Lafata to pay them, and a lot of anger comes our way as a township and as a government when it comes to efficiencies, because they see the property tax rates go up. And Trustee Vosberg explained the biggest reason why, and that was the millage that was passed by the voters right before COVID. Frankly, it was pretty. It was just before. It would have been interesting to see what happened then. No community, no city, no township, no village can be successful without multiple things. And at the top of almost everybody's list is safe streets and dependable public safety, period. There's no other. You cannot exist as a community where people are going to live, invest, locate their businesses and their family long-term if you're not safe on your streets and you are not dependable for the long run. You don't make investments into your family going into schools and in your homes, into a community when you have uncertainty with police, fire, or first responders. We didn't have that here for a long, long time. We had a lot of issues as early as 2016. The proudest thing that I think has been accomplished the last 4 years is the elected board here, in concert with the Friends of Chesterfield Police, the community support, every member of that department and of every member of this township, with a pinpoint focus on how to make our department the best in this county or the best in this state, and how to make them sustainable long term. So when we were working together, when we were functioning, this township-wide special assessment district concept was brought to light. There are some risks with this, and the risks are that every year, this board, whether it's us sitting in the seat or fast forward 20, 30 years or 4 months, and other folks sitting in this board, that levy can be assessed anywhere from 10 mils to 0. So hence, making sure our department is well-funded, which they are, well-trained, which they are, well-equipped, which they are, that their facilities are being updated, which they are and they will continue to be. And the expense side of this. So much work went into not only the funding side, but the expense side. It's legacy costs. Crippling when not long ago for this community, of our retiring medical, funding of our pensions, current medical costs. These were some couple focus areas that were just devastating our department. So getting those in line, getting capital improvement plan in line, getting the expense piece of this ledger, and I know there was a question on that, I think it was from Mr. Shar again, about what happens with this budget. What happens is every single line item gets unraveled, unrolled, tore apart, looked at with the director of public safety, his management team, finance director. Every single number, what do they need? Do you need more? And find a way to fund it, which we have. So liberating from where we were 4 years ago. 4 years and a month ago, sitting in this room, there was discussion, how do we save the department? And this is after a couple failed millages, a couple years behind, and the result was a loan, and that is still a loan from general fund to the public safety department. Fast forward to where we are now. Sustainable legacy costs. No longer highest in the region to run our department, but best practice in the region. Amazing people on the street that are getting it done every single day, and we did our job because it's sustainable long-term, and that's probably the proudest thing in the last 4 years that we got done. So number one, safe streets. Well, there's some other pretty important things to have a successful, sustainable community, some of which we don't affect at all, like schools. That's back in the day when I was in the Michigan legislature, we affect that. But other ones, we can't affect, and that is recreation. I know I heard a shot someplace about, with a lot of misinformation about parks and in the shoreline. You gotta have paths, you gotta have parks, you gotta have recreation. You also gotta have competitive utilities, dependable sewer, water, electric, and competitive property taxes. It does you no good if you are not competitive on the property tax side to invest and to be able to make a community sustainable. So we're fortunate. We can have both, which is amazing, well-funded, sustainable out into the foreseeable future unless of huge mistakes get made, and competitive tax rates. And I'll be pushing for both, constantly pushing for upgrades on our facilities. There's a lot of big plans on the horizon. That is the refronting of our police building. That is taking the entrance and putting it where it belongs, off of Town Center or off of I-94 with a visible professional entrance. It's repurposing the fire station on Jefferson. It's partnering with our neighboring communities like New Haven and New Baltimore, expanding those partnerships that we already have. Couldn't be prouder of how far we've come on this budget. I will continue to push for the best trained, best equipped, best paid, most sustainable department, and I'll also be pushing for competitive taxes as well. With that, I'm going to bring it up to the public, and then I'll come around for round two. We haven't gone to the public on this item just yet. Any public comment on item 8A?
I just felt the need to come back to the microphone and clarify, because Trustee Joseph, thanks for your compliment, but I feel like you came for me when I didn't come for you. And what I was referencing when I said population, populations can be anyone, but at the end of the day, what I said was a compliment to our police department. So I would appreciate the same respect from you that I would give to you. So populations mean that the population I'm representing, whoever it may be, whether it's the Girl Scout troop or the homeowners association, they are happy with our police department and don't have an issue with them. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Let's bring it back forward.
You want my name and address? Or just, I want to say one thing. I've lived here 32 years in Chesterfield. I've raised my kids here. I raised my grandchildren here. And happily, I have 3 great-grandchildren. They all live in Chesterfield. One reason and one reason only is to save this community and this state. And it's because of our police and fire department. All right? And I want everybody to think for 1 second and just put a price down on a piece of paper with a dollar sign. And tell me what you really think the cost of a life is. If we outsource our police department, it takes 14 minutes to get response to a call. If you call our police department right now, it takes 3. Put a price on a life. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Back up the board, Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. There is no price on a life. You're 1,000% right. There is absolutely no price on a life. Thanks for coming back to the podium and setting the record straight, Mr. Merriweather. I really just didn't know where you were going with that, and I understand now, so thank you for that. Mr. Supervisor, you made a comment, and it was sincere, and it spoke to a time on our board relations where we were much better functioning. And when you go back to the discussions that took place, myself, you, we had many. You had a lot of things on your plate, and there were a lot of theories and a lot of ideas about what to do with police and fire. And we heard those at the podium from residents, and you had said many times in your board comments, all options are on the table. All options are on the table. All options are on the table. And it was a very truthful statement. All options were on the table. One person cannot investigate and flush out all options. And I recall, after having a conversation with Treasurer LaFata, Trustee Anderson was our police liaison appointee, about the concept of combining and working to bring together the SAD. And there was no, to this day, there's never been anything from you that says, I did this, I did that, I did this. On this issue, it was we. It was we. And it was truly a we. A very great leader here. It's our former supervisor, Mr. Ellis. In talking with him, he said that he put a premium on being able to get things done by abandoning pride of authorship. That if you're not concerned about being the author, you can get a lot more done. I say that because I really have to bite my tongue listening to the clerk's rendition of meeting with the chief and all that nonsense. It's complete nonsense. It really wasn't fair. It's not a fair recitation, and I resent it. I really do resent it. There was a we there. You weren't part of it. And I don't know what this is. If there's a point of order, make the point of order. But I really don't know why the comments. I really don't know. It was an unfair attempt to take responsibility for something never happened. It absolutely never happened. And I don't know why we're doing this revisionist history. And I appreciate your comments, Mr. Supervisor, to simply say you will look at the tax and the cost in the comparison of the budget. That I respect. Last year when we went from 8 to 7.95, I didn't think it was a good move, especially if we were looking to try to figure out how to pay back a loan. If you have a $3 million loan on the books and you're hovering at zero break even on the budget, there's no room to talk about 7.90, not earnestly pay back that loan. So it was contentious when we started this discussion again several months ago with whether or not it was going to go down to 7.90 and so forth. I was adamantly opposed to that, and I would like to get back to a place where we make decisions without the pride of authorship and without the eyes because we've had that once before. And when you look at this budget moving forward, if we're both fortunate enough to be here in December, we're going to have to make decisions about staffing levels. And you're going to have to make decisions about an increased training budget. And Chief Miller has some ideas about the fire department and what that should look like. And we really do need to be in a place where we can have those without politics. And I would like to get back to that. There's a lot of discussion, and it's very difficult, Clerk Barry. Do you have the floor? I mean, I don't know what's going on.
She's asking to speak because we're on round two. You're
You're
the first speaker on round two.
No, I get that, but
I do it all the time. I think I'm usually like, hey, do you want to speak?
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I got two more left in the queue.
Thank you.
Clerk Barry.
Motion to call for question.
Support.
I guess there's no motion. That is a non-debatable motion. We have a motion to call the question by Clerk Barry, support by Trustee Joseph. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth. Aye. Treasurer LaFava.
Aye.
Supervisor Echeverry.
Aye. Clerk Barry, please, we have a motion to approve item 8A by Trustee Joseph, support by Trustee Domingue to approve item 8A. Please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth. Aye. Treasurer LaFava.
Aye.
Supervisor Echeverry.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Motion passes. Item 8B.
Item 8B is a request from the Public Safety Department to approve the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 182, amending the Chesterfield Township Code of Ordinances, Chapter 46, Offenses and Miscellaneous Provisions, Article 2, and prohibitions with respect to the offense, Article 2, Offenses Against Property, Division 5, Trespass, to revise the regulations and prohibitions with respect to the offense of trespassing within the Township of Chesterfield and repealing any and all ordinances and/or resolutions in conflict therein.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Domingue.
Second?
Second by Clerk Barry. Discussion. Questions from the public? Motion by Trustee Domingue, support by Clerk Barry, approve item 8B. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth. Aye. Treasurer LaFava.
Aye.
Supervisor Echeverry.
Aye. Motion passes. Item 8C.
Item 8C is a recommendation from the Facilities and Operations Director to execute the agreement for additional grant funding in the amount of $463,431 for the Brandenburg Park Shoreline Restoration Project, modifications to sub-recipient agreement between Chesterfield Township and the Great Lakes Commission.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Bosworth,
Second.
support by Clerk Barry. Director Songbird.
Yes, hello. This represents our last round of funding for our Brandenburg Shoreline Park project. And we've been talking about this for the last couple of years. We've done a lot of design work, and these next two agenda items represent those last two pieces that we need to complete this project. So I know it's been a long evening, and I would just like to open up to any questions so we get the discussion started. and work through that. I'd be happy to take any questions. We also have our team members from OHM here as well to answer your questions.
Any questions for Director Sonberg? There are 2 action items on the Brandenburg Shoreline Restoration Project.
So,
Any questions from the public?
this, just to be clear, this is a grant-funded project. The majority of this project, thankfully, the township is contributing about, just make sure that it's correct, $227,874 that was committed last year. $169,000 is our portion for the fish habitat project, and $58,000 was to run a path from Jefferson down to the shoreline project, so that was additional funding. Now the shoreline project, the rest, the $1.2 million, including that encompasses this $463,000, is all provided by grant funding. So we were lucky enough in this township to secure a grant for over $1.2 million. So I know in these times, what says even more about this project is the fact that these funding groups have still committed this money, even through COVID, working through all these issues and things we've gone through. This group has been solid in funding this project. In fact, this $463,000 represents additional funding. When we started this back in, I think we came to the board in October 19, there was some discussions, we went out to bid, the numbers came back a little higher, so instead of scaling the project back, that group committed to funding this additional $463,000. So once again, we're spending roughly $200,000, we're getting $1.2 million additional, so I think it's a really good thing for the township.
Trustee Joseph.
Could you speak to that a little bit, expound on that just a little bit more with regard to separating out? So the agenda item, as it's written, looks like somewhere in the safe, in the township safe, there's $463,000 that's going to go to this project. Could you elaborate on what amount of general fund money or taxpayer money outside of the grant comes out of the township? So that's part of that 463.
Sure. So this $463,000 is a grant to us from our partners in the project. This is not coming out of general fund. This is a grant that's being sent to us to spend in this project. Instead of scaling the project back, they gave us some additional funding, which is fantastic in these times. So to answer Mr. Joseph's questions, to touch on our Chesterfield's portion of the project, back in October 2019, we came to the board and we asked for the original round of funding, which included our contribution to the grant agreement, which is $169,874. So Chesterfield, in order to get this $1.2 million, is contributing $169,874. We, outside of that grant agreement, agreed to spend $58,000. Basically what it boils down to, for those of you who haven't heard this before, is we have to put a construction road in from Jefferson to the shoreline to transport all the materials. Well, at the time, it didn't make sense for us to put a temporary road in to drive through Brandenburg Park and then rip it back out. So when OHM and our team members designed that road, we designed that road that we would simply cap that in asphalt and create an additional path down to the shoreline. So we're capitalizing on some of our already money that we're spending on construction costs. Now that $58,000 is a budget placeholder, we'll probably do it for less. We're going to work on that number, but we needed a budget based on square footage. So we put the $58,000 in there. That comes out of general fund, and the $169,874. All the other funding for this project, which brings our total to $1,348,005.90. Comes from that makes our project total. So we're at 1.3, with our contribution being $169,000. I can't speak to how fortunate we've been on several of these projects. Our team has worked really hard to capture a lot of grant funding. We're not, God love you, I wish we had friends with facilities to help us do some of our stuff, but we don't. So we have to fight for every dollar, and especially these times. I'm a resident myself, and I'll let you know that we've done a really good job scraping money together. Every project that we've done, we've raised almost $2 million in grant funding in the last couple of years, which is unheard of. So this just speaks to some of that funding.
Thank you.
Quick, I couldn't support this item more. So just under 2 years ago, this item was first brought in front of this board. It's been here, this will be the 5th time, starting December 17, 2008 with the concept. At that point, we we had support to restore that shoreline, which was the next piece. Now, how do you do it for the best value to the taxpayer? You look for partners. And the partners in this instance is the Great Lakes Commission through NOAA and the federal government, which is a substantial pot of money you're going to see advertised all over the place to restore the Great Lakes. And how do we get our fair share here in Chesterfield? So this is the 5th time it's been here. The project will be a total of approximately $1.5 million with the design and the implementation. Already been approved to participate on our level. It's $169,000 with a $715,000 grant through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The budget, the plans came in over, or the bids came in over budget. So the item after this is going to be to award the contract. Well, this is such an important project to the federal government, NOAA, the initiative, and the impact it's going to have on the basin. They went back to them and asked for an additional nearly $500,000, which is what this is, 100% grant money. And watching this come to fruition in 2 years, the closest one of these that you could go see would be in Marysville, their shoreline on the south side of that city, and all around town. This shoreline restoration is going to be fantastic. There will be some impact if passed. This item and the next item as early as beginning of or mid of September, and by next spring, I think we'll have a restored, functional, useful shoreline at very, very minimal expense to the Chesterfield taxpayer, along with the path connecting the two. So I fully support this item, and I thank the entire team and the department for all the work. Any further questions or comments from the public? Motion by Trustee Vosper, support by Clerk Berry to approve item 8C as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Vosper. Aye. Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFatta.
Aye.
Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye. Motion passes. Item 8D.
Thank you for support.
Maybe hang tight right there.
Item 8D is a recommendation from the Facilities and Operations Director to award and execute the contract for Brandenburg Park Shoreline Restoration Project to Anglin Civil in the amount of $987,091.75 from GL number 545000130.
Support. Move to support.
Who's the motion? Oh, motion by Trustee Domingue.
I'll support it.
Support by Trustee Vosper. Discussion. Comments from the public? Further comments from the board? Motion by Trustee Domingue, support by Trustee Vosper to approve item 8D. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Vosper. Aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFatta. Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. Item
Thank
8.
you, Board. Thank you from the Parks and Rec Department for this. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Director Steinberg. Item 8E.
Item 8E is to approve a recommendation by Public Works to award the construction of the open cut portion of the 2020 sanitary sewer rehabilitation project to the lowest responsible bidder, Telto Contracting, Inc., at a cost of $221,742.50. Public Works is also recommending the approval of the open cut total project cost of $285,769.53 from GL number 591541801.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Joseph. Is it?
Support.
Support by Trustee Domingue. Director Costa.
So these are, after doing a bunch of TBing and cleaning of the sewer, we found several repairs that need to be made. These are high on the priority list to get fixed, because there's probably going to be a problem if we don't fix these. They're going to fail. And this has been an ongoing process. I am happy to say that we were lucky to get four bidders on this, which was better than what we thought. And Telto Contracting is a more than capable contractor to do this work for us. And we're happy to get this project moving.
Questions for Director Costa? Comments from the public? Motion by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Deming to approve item 8E as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Deming.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFava. Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Thank you.
Item 8F.
Item 8F is a recommendation by Public Works to adopt Resolution 2020-29 to opt in to the Residential Emergency Water Assistance Relief Program to provide water and wastewater utility bill payment assistance to all food assistance eligible residents.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve and adopt Resolution 2020-29.
Support. Motion by Clerk Berry, support by trustee Anderson. Discussion.
This briefly came from Senate Bill 690 from the state of Michigan recently. This came up, this is to help out a lot of people that have lost their jobs, either permanently or temporarily, and it's an assistance to help them keep water and sewer and water services at their house. The state has dedicated $25 million to help with this, and right now it's set to go to the end of the year. And if they had any arrearages from the end of March, I believe, up until the end of the year this year, we looked at the program hard. We felt it's the right thing to do to opt into this. We'll be working with the state of Michigan and the Community Action Agency through Macomb County to make all this happen, and we think it's the right thing to do.
I'm going to start with trustee Bosworth and then I'll go to treasurer.
Thank you. This is an opt-in. What if we did not opt in? What would the difference be for the water bill payers?
Then the people that need the assistance would not get it from in our community.
Okay, so, and what cost, if any, is any of this to the township?
Well,
Are there delays?
there was, they said we might have to take a reduction, but after we watched the webinar, myself and Assistant Director Johnson, they said that we would take up to a 25% less than what the bill actually is, but they reiterated that after and said, no, they would pay that and we would get 100% of the money back.
So there could be a delay in us receiving the money while they're going through that process of applying, but we will eventually get the money.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Treasurer LaFava.
Actually, very kind to this raises the threshold for income for people that are unemployed, if I'm not mistaken. They can still make a little bit more money than the current program that's offered by Great Lakes Water. The other 25%, I think I asked Mr. Johnson that what our exposure was, and I think it was a part of like $350,000 maximum at the time, just to get an idea before I thought it was a good idea that we help our residents. So actually it does two things. It raises the threshold for residents that are unemployed and currently couldn't get any assistance. We do have some exposure, but it's not that drastic that it's going to raise.
That is true. I will say you're absolutely right. Anybody that's eligible for the food assistance program through the county will be eligible for assistance through this. And it is a little higher than what it was with the RAP program that we already are involved in. Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? I agree with Treasurer LaFava. There is some risk, there is some cost, but I think the benefit of ensuring, especially during COVID, that this population has got water. We do not shut it off anymore, but this is a good thing to do for our customers. And I believe it will be 100% reimbursed, but there is some risk. Any comments from the public? Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Anderson, to approve item 8F as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth.
Aye.
Trustee Deming.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFava.
Aye.
Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye. Motion passes.
I'm sure the people of Chesterfield thank you.
Item 8G.
Item 8G is a recommendation to approve the purchase of upgrading the current standing microphones to 14 wireless microphones in the amount of $12,000 from account number 101275985.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Joseph, supported by treasurer LaFava. Director Duchesne is here.
Available to answer any questions. This is a continuation of our AVIT project that began with the assignment of the QBS team last year in fall. As you know, some of the enhancements have included going live for the first time in Chesterfield history, February 25th, live streaming through the commercial medium of YouTube, not going actually direct cable. That's been the standard in the industry for decades. But we started to publish and go live stream live meetings on the 25th of February. Since that time, as the beta phase of the project rolled out, we found some things needed to be enhanced. I am pleased that part of this tonight is a complete a renewal of the system. We're going to get a new system with an upgrade that's more powerful that the team's been working on to handle live streaming and recording. At the same time, the vendor is doing that for lower cost on the portable microphones. The team did look at doing portable microphones originally, but we did want to be a little more fiscally conservative. Looking at it now, especially during COVID CARES time, this will be able to be funded from our CARES funds, and the amount of the microphones, the $12,000, is an excellent price for the quality of the material that you're receiving. So the team, I'm sure, I did not poll them, but this has clearly been our operating objective since we started to upgrade and change the equipment. And I'm very sure after some 30 or more years in public broadcasting of public facilities and meetings that this will enhance the viewer quality and the quality of the meeting publications.
Trustee Domingue.
Mr. Duchesne, we get anything back for these?
Yes. Actually, those are all going back, and the deal is it would, the transfer of those in, we'll get the new portable mics. It would be a $21,000 outright purchase for the other ones, but we're getting that for $12,000. Plus, all of that equipment is going to be changed out to a higher and better product. And our vendor who's doing the installation, Able Electronics, there's no additional charges in that.
Okay. I just didn't want to say we're going to get stuck with these.
No, we're not able, we are clearly not able to use these.
Trustee Busman.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Duchesne, can you tell me what on the executive summary it says under discussion that it eliminates all voting? What does that mean?
It had a component in the unit that would allow us to do electronic voting. We didn't utilize that at the time and weren't planning on doing that. So that takes that out of the system.
Oh, so they're saying they're eliminating that?
Yeah, that feature or that function of it,
Okay.
yeah. We're still going to have to vote somehow, sometime.
Right.
That was long meeting humor.
Yes, thank you. Then, in comparison, like at the state level, even the county board of commissioners, they push a button and then
It goes up on the
shows
screen.
on the monitor.
Yeah, we're making it a little bit simpler than that.
We're still going to do the verbal.
They'll still have to do that.
All right, and count to 4. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion on the board? Comments from the public? Motion by Trustee Joseph, supported by Treasurer LaFava to approve item 8G as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee LaFava.
Aye.
Or Treasurer LaFava. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth.
Aye.
Supervisor Ackevetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, no.
Item 8H.
Item 8H is to request to purchase 17 HP laptops, 18 cases, 18 Microsoft Office 2019 for various departments, and 6 Panasonic Toughbooks for code enforcement in building department in the amount of $47,139.42 from GL number 101275984.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Joseph.
Support.
Supported by Treasurer LaFava. Ms. Deputy Treasurer Clark is here if you have any questions. Do expect these to be COVID refundable?
Yes, they will be applied to our CARES fund money. This is a request from all the other departments. We asked them to, if we had to close down or Zoom meetings or something like that, what they would need to continue working. And these were the requests from each department. So it was an accumulated
Any questions from the board? Clerk Berry.
Was the vendor who's been selected the low bid on this purchase?
It is state bid prices. We did request, I sent out 2 requests for other vendors to give us quotes. I did not receive them back before, because we have a limited time in which we can purchase these. We have to have it by October. So to have the board's approval, I mean, I gave them at least 2 weeks and neither one of the vendors responded.
Were they local vendors? Or?
Both have been vendors we have used in the past in our bidding process.
Were they just overwhelmed, do you think?
I don't know. I sent them the information that we needed and they did not respond.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Questions from the public? Motion by Trustee Joseph, supported by Treasurer LaFleur, to approve item 8H as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFleur.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Bosford.
Aye.
Supervisor Riccabetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, no.
Motion passes. Thank you. There are no addendum tonight. Item 10 is public comment. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and state your name for the record. Start any second.
Good evening, Township Board and Chesterfield Township residents. My name is John Spico. Elected officials need to lead by example, and leading by example is the Spico way. As residents, we should never settle okay in our elected officials. We should demand excellence from our elected officials. After all, they work for us, the people. I want to personally thank everyone that exercised their right to vote in Tuesday's primary. Having your voices heard, after all, if elected, we would work for you, the people. In the Code of Ethics and Values that was recommended by Clerk Berry and Trustee Bosberg on June 9, 2020, and passed, it clearly states, as a representative of Chesterfield Township, I will be ethical. In practice, it means I'm trustworthy, I'm truthful, do what I say I will do, and I'm dependable. I make impartial decisions, free of bribes, I'm fair. Clerk Berry signed the Code of Ethics. I asked the residents, how ethical is it to collect a full-time salary at the taxpayer's expense and not show up for work? How ethical is it to go to Lansing and protest on the clock and getting paid by taxpayers of Chesterfield? How ethical is it to bring an individual from Kansas here to work in the clerk's office, have him living in your house, and then at night campaigning for you? How ethical is it to lie to residents? All of this is highly unethical. At any workplace that I know of, this consistent behavior would be automatic grounds of dismissal. The clerk would be fired. Again, as residents, we should never accept this type of behavior from our elected officials. They work for us, the people. This is an election year, and together we can make the changes that Chesterfield needs and deserves on November 3rd and fire Clerk Barry. As a candidate myself running for the treasurer's office in this township, what I see playing out by our elected officials is unacceptable and highly unethical. At the last board meeting, I spoke about stacking the deck. What is stacking the deck? It's buying and stealing a seat from the people for your own self-interest agenda. In my opinion, Mr. Accavetti is stacking the deck, and this is how he's doing it. He's trying to put a stranglehold on this board. When you get a stranglehold on this board, your police department's gone, your water rates are gonna go through the roof, there's no checks and balances, and we might as well just hand the checkbook over to Dan Accavetti. This is not Dan's township, this is Chesterfield Township, the People's Township. He's not happy with the 4-3 board for the most part. Dan doesn't like discussions. He wants a 5-2 board, no discussions, no questions asked, and a rubber stamp in the treasurer's office. He wants a blank check to do whatever he wants. Mr. Accavetti from the beginning did not support Mr. LaFata in the treasurer's office. Mr. LaFata asked too many questions and wanted specific details from Mr. Accavetti on what the money was intended for, and in long term, how we were going to continue to fund and maintain his proposed projects. Mr. LaFata wasn't a team player on Danny's team. Mr. LaFata was honest, was too honest for Danny. Danny Accavetti didn't own Paul LaFata's loyalty. Mr. LaFata's loyalty and commitment as an elected official was to the residents of this township where it should be. Mr. LaFata did what he was elected to do, protect and safeguard the taxpayers' money, ask questions, and not rubber stamp what the supervisor wants. Mr. LaFata did his job. He did not give Dan Accavetti an open checkbook to the people's money. This is why Supervisor Accavetti and family members are donating thousands of dollars to Accavetti's treasurer candidate, Rubber Stamp. Dan Accavetti is trying to buy and steal a seat from this resident. I asked the residents, is that ethical? Highly unethical. If Supervisor Accavetti can get his preferred candidate who he wants in the treasurer's office, that would be a game changer. That's where the money's at, folks, for everything that you need to do in this township. This township would have no checks, no balances, no questions asked. This township's treasurer's seat would be bought and paid for by Supervisor Accavetti. Dan Accavetti would own his treasurer's loyalty. As a candidate, I am not bought and paid for by anyone. My loyalty is to the residents of this township. I am committed to you and serving you. If I were elected, that would be a game changer for Mr. Dan Accavetti. There would be no seat in this township is for sale.
5 minutes, you're done. Mr. Spica, you're done. 5 minutes, you're done. Thank you. Any further public comment?
It's Spica, by the way.
Any further public comment?
Paul Manley, 48112 Fuller Road. I should have made this comment before, but in 2017, we paid cumulative 8.5 mils for our police and fire department. And David Joseph went out and did a lot of research, had a really great slideshow, and he showed the people of Chesterfield Township how we could save money by combining the two departments, and he researched it well. I've got to admit, I was against it at the time, and I spoke at the podium and said I was against it at the time. I'd like to retract that. You did a good job. Thank you very much. And the next thing I'd like to say is the paddle park on Jefferson. I went over there this week and went down Salt River with my kayaks. It's a beautiful park. If anybody gets a chance to go there and take a ride down there, it's awesome. Take the time to do it. It's worth your trip. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments?
I'm here because of your bike lanes. I'm here because of your sidewalks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you state your name?
My name's Allison. I'm Jefferson. Your shoreline is your greatest asset. Please protect it. Thank you for supporting our police and fire. Thank you for your bias and de-escalation training. It is time for police not to be judge and jury in these times. They're responsible to keep everyone safe, including suspects. So I hope part of your training will include medical training, so that there are incidents in Chesterfield makes front page of the papers. I believe it's time for transparency. I think the math adds up to, if I understood you correctly, a 38 millage plus an 8 millage for public safety would be a 46 total. If that's my understanding, then I think it's important for citizens to be able to compare communities' special assessments with their total millage. And speaking of transparency, it's time that if you're going to put a separate millage on top of a millage, that you would include the citizens in pay and benefits and start thinking about coordination of benefits and controlling costs in this day and age. Fines, I think it's time that if fines are levied on people, that they are not sent to the department which levies them to remove any conflict of interest. This is a very interesting meeting, and I want to say Belle Isle is a gem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Joe Kadich, I live on Sutton. I think it was a good meeting too. One question you didn't respond to was, I asked because of the fact that your millage income now matches your public safety budget, that why can't we go back to the taxes and the millage that the voters voted in on and have some control? You've got, basically, with this Public Act 51, as I said before, you've got the privilege, I guess, or whatever have you, of adding 2 more mills to the public protection without any involvement of the citizens. It's not that we don't trust you, but I think because we're paying for it, we should ought to be able to vote on whatever has to come. You've gotten through the tough time, you used the money out of the Fireman's Surplus Fund to do what you wanted. Let's get it back to a normal thing where the people get involved. If you need more millage, you should be able to explain why and get a vote for it. If you can't verify it, if you can't justify it, then you won't get it voted in. But it should be up to the people to allow on that. One other thing I wanted to say, I said before I wasn't going to talk about it, but obviously the Vandenberg Park shoreline is happening. I tried to get some response from you, either to poll the people to see whether they wanted that or possibly putting in a beach of some type. Didn't get anything there. I said, go back to the Corps of Engineers, whoever you're working with, see about putting the fish habitat instead of there, to put it in the Salt River Marsh that they're going to be dredging next year. Use that money there rather than at the park. It would still allow you somewhere down the road access to the lake. It didn't do that, so I guess we're going to get stuck with what we got, is looking at waves, hoping there's fish under there, and forget what the people would want to do. And I guess if that's the position you're taking, there's a sign, used to be on 23 Mile Road, about Chesterfield gateway to Anchor Bay. I guess you should probably put a notice on there too, that the gate's no longer there, it's closed. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? We'll bring up to any further comments from the public. We'll bring up to the board. Myself is going to go first. I have no comments. Trustee Dominguez.
Okay. Okay. I just want to thank the board for supporting everything at the park. You know,
Amanda's going to be happy, Park and Recs Commission. It's going to be beautiful when it's done. It's going to be a great asset for this township because we have a gem on Lake St. Clair with Brandenburg. I've seen that place when it was just a field back in the late 60s and early 70s to where it's at now. And I think it's going to be a long way. It's going to get better. And I want to thank the board members for supporting it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Trustee Bosberg.
Thank you. I would also thank the people who came out tonight for the public hearing. And what I heard tonight were many questions. We're here to ask questions, not just make comments. And I would like to just encourage people, don't wait for the annual meeting to show up to ask your questions or make statements. And don't even wait for our board meetings that occur twice a month. When you have questions, you want something answered, please call the board office or call the township office. There's people that work here that can maybe answer your questions. If it's more of a nature of why are certain decisions being made, you can ask for one of the elected officials and we will get back with you if we're not in the office at the time. We have a very good voicemail system that actually comes to our email. We're notified as soon as somebody contacts us, we can contact you and answer any questions that you might have. As was spoken earlier, I believe by Mr. Thomas, that the township government is the most local form of government. That's where you can get the answers and get the services that you need for your local services. And we're here to help you find those, give those services as you need them. Thank you.
Treasurer Lofado.
Well, usually I don't like to take credit for where credit's due, but back in 2015, when we were having the police moratorium, our public safety director was police chief back then. And I was retired and did a lot of research on I supported the moratorium meetings and how to fund a police department. Went through Michigan compiled law and sent Director Kirsten an email saying, why don't we create a special assessment district to fund the police department? Well, before that I had a chance, there was a $3.5 million transfer from the general fund. Well, the general fund money was running out. So I started on my original endeavor for a special assessment district. It was not the clerk's idea. I went to the police chief at the time. I brought a copy of Canton Township's public safety model with me. A lot of work went in that, and especially after we got back, which nobody actually reviewed, was the Plant Moran audit that was done that showed that if there was a millage increase, a voter millage increase by the electorate by $1.5 million, there was still a shortfall. If it was 2 mills, there'd still be a shortfall. So I did a lot of number crunching at home. I'm not always perfect. So my daughter that's a finance graduate from Albion, and my son that's got a master's in finance from Wayne State University, I made sure that they checked all of my data to make sure that the projections were correct. Worked with the township assessor about establishing a special assessment district. He said no problem. Got with our attorney and said no problem. Only there was a bump in the road when it got to our legal counsel because he was directed not to use the board approval process, but to use the voter approval process, which was another bump in the road. Very difficult because time was running out. There wasn't enough time. But whoever said that they did it and where it came from, this was a very grueling process, and it was not welcomed by some of the people on the board at first. It was only because of necessity and constant help from Trustee Joseph that people understood that there was a need to fund a public safety department. And it just didn't happen because somebody walked in to the clerk's office. Please do not believe that. I am not a politician, but if Director Kirsten doesn't have a copy of the email, I have one on record. Be glad to give it to everybody. along with all the iterations of the projections that I did. I hate politicians, but they try to take credit for a lot of hard work, and it doesn't belong to them. Put a lot of hard work, and I went through a lot of grief for this to happen. And there's one other thing. Would have been nice if we approved the residents to be able to go watch the fish in a fish habitat, but maybe that'll happen in the future. And the other thing I don't understand is every time something comes up for IT, our clerk, even though the clerk's going to get 4 of these laptop computers, one of the highest departments that requested computers, votes no. So she benefits, but then declines to. It's kind of like mixed emotions. I want something, but I really don't want to approve what I want. So it's kind of. Oh, I have one more. Mr. Speaker mentioned ethics, and there was a deliberation from our human resources on the hiring of a election worker that lived in the same house as our clerk. And it says it was in conflict with APO 2020-14. And it says that it's up to the Township Board to weigh in on this. And ever since this has been out, on August the 3rd, I haven't seen anybody on the Township Board that was for this or the persons that authored this doing anything to correct the situation or even mentioning it. So I think this ethics thing, this ethics policy, which has no structure or no statute in law for any enforcement, was just a political ploy. Because we have something, there's one other thing. We have purchasing policies and we have APOs. And it is the supervisor's responsibility, if there isn't a township superintendent, to enforce these. None of these happen. We have them, they're violated, and it doesn't seem like for certain reasons or certain people there's any kind of enforcement. But this ethics thing was written by a person that has been proven to be unethical. It should be enforced by another person that authored it but chooses not to. So I'm kind of confused, and I thank you all for being here tonight.
Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Well, the good news is apparently Treasurer LaFata and I had the same good idea at the same time, and we were able to implement it, which was a good thing, and we've seen the benefits of that. So I've said many times it doesn't matter to me who gets the credit as long as the thing gets done, and I was glad to be a part of that, again, regardless of how we want to rewrite history, and it really does not matter at this point. But it's unfortunate that we hear, after elections and during election year, the rhetoric changes dramatically, and sometimes good policy goes by the wayside. I'm glad that so far that hasn't happened here. My 2 no votes tonight are very simple. First one, no on the upgrade of the wireless microphones. I adamantly was opposed to going with the system while I was on the QBS team. I spoke against it then, was criticized for that. That's quite all right. I knew I was right then. It's proven now. And I'm not going to throw good money after bad. I don't believe that we have the proper infrastructure here. We don't have the proper staffing here in order to support the system. So even if we spend the money on this, even though it's going to be covered by the CARES Act, it's still our taxpayer dollars at the end of the day. We still don't have the proper structure, infrastructure, or training here in order to support it. That hasn't changed. So that's why I voted no on that. I think it's throwing good money after bad, and it's the wrong way to go. I think we need to look at another option and another solution, and I would be happy to update the QBS team on that as I did during the process. However, that solution was not the way they wanted to go, and therefore they moved forward with the solution that we have today, which has proven to be considerably problematic. Secondly, the no vote on the laptops. We talked a lot about following policy, and that's very important. I certainly understand the time constraints on this particular funding source. However, this is clearly a violation of our purchasing policy. Anything over $25,000 needs to go to a sealed bid. I would have even seen foregoing the sealed bid. I could see that if that were asked of the board to do that. We could have done that 2 weeks ago and asked to forego that for this particular purchase or for any purchase that was related to the CARES Act. We could have gone a couple of different ways with it and maintained compliance or taken a vote to suspend our rules. That didn't happen here. What we did is we pushed through yet another purchase from this vendor for something that they have no business bidding on. We hired them for a service contract. We did not hire them to did not agree to purchase all IT equipment from them. That IT purchase should have gone for bid, but at the very least, we should have called more than 2 additional vendors to see if we could get an additional price. And so the fact that we were presented with no other option except this, I believe is poor policy, and didn't want to move forward with that. And that's why my no vote on that. And I think that makes sense. You know, we can't, often people talk about following policy when we want to follow it, and then we don't when we don't want to. Well, this is an example of that in that regard. And I think that that's a good point, that we should follow policy unless there's a reason not to, and if there is, have the board approve a suspension of the rules in order to do that. So good way to move forward with that. With regards to any other questions regarding how the township hires and fires, the township does not unilaterally hire anyone that I know of in any of our departments. Not one person has the sole authority to hire anyone. In our case, in the clerk's department, all of our employees are, I would say, vetted by at least a committee of 3. Sometimes that's myself, the HR director, and the HR manager. Sometimes that is 3 members in our department. Sometimes there's always multiple people, and I believe it happens in other departments as well, that there is actually a panel or a committee of 3 that will interview most finalist candidates and then make the decision. So that protocol is set forth by the Human Resource Department, and that's exactly how all of that happens here. The Election Commission is actually the body that approves all of our election inspectors, all of our chairmen, our super chairs, and there are hundreds of them that are approved by that commission every year, or every election cycle. In fact, prior to every election, the election commission is responsible for that. So, again, there's a process for hiring election workers, there's a process for hiring other employees, but either way, they're either dictated with regards to the clerk's department, either by the election commission or by the HR department, and we follow their directives. So, any other questions regarding that, I'm sure, can be addressed by the Human Resource Department. As far as the ongoing election cycle, we will be expected to receive absentee ballots for November on September the 19th. That is the date that is mandated by the state that we must have absentee ballots available for you. If you would like an absentee ballot for the upcoming November general election and you have not already submitted your application for an absentee ballot selecting both election dates, you may do so at any time through the clerk's office. Please submit your completed application for an absentee ballot. We will have those ballots in hand on the 19th of September, but we do not expect to send those ballots out for about another week. It will take approximately that long to process the number of absentee ballots. We now have a record number of permanent absentee ballot voters on our permanent AV list. And so it does take a considerable amount of time now to process those, but we do expect to have them out at the end of September. We are still one of the earliest communities to have those out because we have done a considerable amount of work through the years to streamline that process. And so even though we've got a record number of them, that process continues to work very efficiently, and we expect to have those out at the end of September. If you do not receive an absentee ballot for the November election by the beginning of October, please call the clerk's office. You may track your absentee ballot through our website or through the Secretary of State's website as well. Again, the Michigan Voter Information Center is the place to go. You will be able to view your sample ballot. You will be able to sign up for an absentee ballot, get an absentee ballot application, and you will be able to track that ballot. So the reason why I'm focusing so heavily on absentee ballots is because we now have more than half of our voting registered voters voting by absentee ballot. So it's very important that everyone understand how to access those ballots and how to facilitate using that method of voting. If there are any other questions regarding the upcoming November election, please contact the clerk's office and we'll be happy to assist you. Thank you.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The reaction to the process and how we got to the police SAD, my reaction to that was very angry. It is in a nutshell stolen valor. It's a problem for me, not from pride of authorship, but because during the campaign there were a lot of mailers and things that talked about somehow Clerk Berry creating something and the police unions that endorsed were not real, they didn't represent the officers, and there was just a real widespread ugliness during the campaign. Trustee DeMake, I appreciate very quickly the very first opportunity to publicly say I don't have anything to do with that campaign. I feel he ran an honorable campaign. I'm proud to serve with you and look forward to hopefully being here again. The campaign is behind us. It was, as I said the week before the election, I felt as though it was one tiger short of its own Netflix series. I look to the November race as having maybe more of a discussion about issues. I, of course, know the trustees that I serve with. I know Treasurer Hartman, who was seeking a seat as a trustee, and certainly Mr. Grievous, who's been around the township for a long time. I would like to know and talk a little bit more with Ms. Merriweather and Mr. Elliott on the trustee side. I believe that every candidate in the race is interested in promoting the township and putting the township interest first. It doesn't matter, as I say, whether you're Republican or Democrat. The speaker that got up, Mr. Manley, he was at every meeting that I can recall as we were working our way through the moratorium and the formation of that public safety SAD. That deal was brokered on trust, and there were people in the fire department that to this day don't particularly like me. I know that, and it doesn't change the fact that I shook their hand, looked them in the eye, and gave them my word. And that was what that deal was based on. They may not like me, but they can't say they don't trust me. I won't go back on the promises that we made them, because the success of our township rises and sets on the safety of our residents. I believe that's our fundamentally chief obligation as an elected official, is the safety and well-being of our residents. So when somebody describes one of the most pivotal times in our township, and clearly Supervisor Accavetti and I have not gotten along, and we've debated some things, but his involvement in that process was honorable, and he did it in a very leadership-driven way in that instance, and that he utilized his team members to go out and bring a plan back. No pride in authorship, he was part of the plan. So to come forward, now we disagreed potentially on the funding, but to come forward and be in a place where we are now talking about is it solvent enough to reduce the rate is a long way away from where we were a few years ago. And to hear, after what we've gone through the last several months, to hear, well, Chief Kirsten stopped by my office and I, did this and I did that, and then I happened to mention to Treasurer LaFave, hey, you should take a look at this because it's a genius idea. In order to believe that, there's just more credibility in a story I heard about a guy selling beans, and you plant them and they grow and you climb up, and it's got more credibility than the story we heard tonight. This is about stolen valor. You just don't do it. You just don't do it. But this is the same person that in a room full of firefighters said, oh, we're all firefighters in some way, and the whole place almost threw up at the same time. This is the kind of thing that happens. And so when Treasurer LaFave talks about ethics, and I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you subscribe to this abhorrent behavior, you're part of the problem. You got to throw that overboard. You have to throw that overboard. The primary's over. All of the ugly insider party things, they threw everything they could throw at us. Treasurer LaFave is not interested in that kind of thing. And he said very clearly, I'm not going to run that kind of race. I feel that I put out what I put out, and I'll go back to my retirement. I have a wonderful family, I have a wonderful home, I have a wonderful life, I live in a wonderful community. I won. There's nothing about being a treasurer that says I have to put, I'm not going to do it. And he's no politician. Very, very ugly campaign, and I was very proud of something that I watched from a candidate who I found myself at the tip of the spear, I guess I would say, and I didn't always appreciate it. But to lose by 10 votes and go to Facebook and say, I gave it everything I had, I'm going to look to the future. There's a lot of people that would have been down here in the morning of demanding a recount and talking about I was robbed, and that to me sort of just wrapped up the whole thing. There's nothing that happened before that when I saw that I thought, that's a very honorable position to do. I don't know that I would have had it in me, and it was a very, very unexpected, pleasantly unexpected thing to see. I lost by 10 votes, but I gave it my all, and I'm going to look for something else in the future. That was noble in a campaign that wasn't always where I would hoped it would be. Mr. Speaker's comments. He clearly isn't really all that fond of what came in people's mailboxes at the night of the election. And they got to work on him right away. So he clearly has a race to run, and I see where he's headed. There are some places where I do value diversity of thought and debate. And I think if we have the ability to weigh in on things, we're a stronger board because of it. And one thing that you did touch on is that Treasurer LaFave was always willing during his time to go through and look at things that were not consistent with what his experience was in the private sector. And when projects went over, somebody was to account for that. And when he brought them forward here, they were called scope changes. And that didn't sit well with him. And so there's a strong argument that says maybe we could have done it differently, and maybe we could have had those debates a little bit differently and more effectively. As we debate moving forward, the old saying is that success has many parents, failure is an orphan. If that SAD went flat, I don't think you'd have a lineup of people talking about what I did 3 years ago when the chief walked by my office and I said, hey, look at this, this is a great idea. I don't think you'd have those comments, but it was a winner. The plan worked, and it requires our ongoing stewardship of it to keep it solvent. It's the commitment that we make to our children and our grandchildren to make this a great community. We have to maintain our public safety. I'm glad that we agreed on that tonight. Politics ended when we made that vote, and I really do appreciate that. I'm not sure how long it will take for the microphone and the audios to work themselves out. As you can see, we have a professional videographer here again tonight. The cost of his services are paid for by a bipartisan group of citizens, myself. I have asked that Treasurer Lafada no longer contribute. I don't want his money. I feel it's just wrong. He's given a lot. He's given a lot. He's a very honorable guy. He didn't deserve to be called a traitor. He didn't deserve to have all the things that were said about him said during the campaign. Whether or not people on this board took part in that or candidates took part in that, it's not my call. It sure seemed like there were a lot of people coming in here high-fiving the supervisor and others and showing up at different places and really going after him in a very savage way. He didn't deserve that. He's at peace with it, so I have to be at peace with it. I'm not running for clerk. I'm not running for treasurer. I'm not running for supervisor. I'm running to be your trustee. I'm going to talk about why I think I should do it through my actions, not campaigning here. And I know that we're in for a rough go between now and November. It's going to be very spirited, to say the least. But I do very much appreciate the outcome of the election. I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be here with my friend, Trustee Anderson, a very honorable person, and I look forward to continuing to serve if that's the will of the residents we serve. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. First thing I have to address here, I'll keep this short, but our audio equipment was quite deplorable, and I know I emailed the supervisor about it, and he did set up a committee, a QBS process. I believe the Treasurer Lafada, Clerk Berry, myself, Mr. Duchesne, and there's a couple others on it. We met multiple times, presentations, usually in the morning. I forgot the exact number. And when we actually had the vendors come in, stand right here. One gentleman stood here with his blue jeans and talked about what a good product he had somewhere in Ann Arbor. The other vendors actually brought their equipment with them. Mr. Duchesne was talking about some of the features it had, and we come to consensus, recommended one to the full board for application. The clerk at that time was totally against it, as she was tonight. I gotta say that I do not recall the clerk ever being at any of those meetings. There was about 6 of them. I don't recall her being at any of them. And I'll let that part go there. Public safety. Supervisor Accavetti, you touched on something tonight that is the number one duty of government is to provide for the public safety of the community. That's the number one thing. You don't have anything else if you don't have order. And the work that has been done on this issue, and it comes up every year. And I was involved in the police board. I was back since 1992. An officer, Kirsten back then, helped us at the high school, their children. Every year it's been an issue. Very few years that it was an easy coast. It's ongoing to find the appropriate, adequate, fair amount of funding, and nowadays for public safety. I do want to say I do feel honored to have worked with Trustee Lafada and Mr. Joseph. They did the yeoman's work on this Department of Public Safety, the nuts and the bolts. How does it work? How does it fit into Public Act? How to get it on board, and this board approved it. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Final thing I want to talk about, since some of this played out here in this room, is 2 of my fellow board members and I were the targets of a highly organized, funded and sustained political attacks of a dubious and erroneous nature during this primary. I want to thank the public and the residents out there that could see through it. And, I believe we're losing a tremendous asset to this township, a gentleman that is more concerned about the money of the township than just rubber stamping things. So, thank you.
Item number 12 is closed session. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed
Motion by
session.
Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Mink. We go into closed session. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Domingue. Aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Bosworth. Aye. Treasurer Lafada.
Aye.
Supervisory Committee.
Aye. We are in closed session at 10 o'clock.
Here over there.
In the